Room at 7 o'clock. The UK has seen its record for the hottest June day broken for the fifth time in 2 days. Temperatures reached 36.7 degrees Celsius in Somerset earlier, as a red warning for extreme heat extends into tomorrow. London Ambulance Service received its highest ever number of life-threatening emergencies yesterday. Craig Harmon is a Chief Operating Officer at LAS and told Tonight with Andrew Marr we are all impacted by the extreme conditions.
So we all need to be drinking water even when we're not thirsty, staying out of the sun during the hottest parts of the day, and particularly avoiding, exercise and things like that. We'd be encouraging people to avoid any strenuous activities, specifically during the hot periods of the day.
A teenage boy has been cleared of both the murder and manslaughter of a 9-year-old girl in Weston-super-Mare. Aria Thorpe died from a single stab wound to her chest at her home in December last year. LBC's Thea Rickard says the 16-year-old, who can't be named because of his age, claimed it wasn't intentional.
He later told the jury at Bristol Crown Court that what had happened was he picked up a knife from the kitchen of Aria's home and went into the lounge where she was sitting on the sofa. He said to try and scare her. The boy demonstrated moving the knife in a ninja-style way before jabbing it towards Aria. He said the knife accidentally went into Aria. Now, that's something jurors accepted today when they returned the verdicts of not guilty to both charges.
More than 24,000 people are unaccounted for after back-to-back earthquakes hit Venezuela. At least 164 people have been killed in the capital Caracas, where the quakes struck a minute apart yesterday afternoon. Kemi Badenoch has refused to apologise after calling the Education Secretary a spiteful class warrior during yesterday's PMQs. They clashed outside the chamber shortly afterwards, with Bridget Phillipson telling Andrew Marr last night the Tory leader is perpetually angry. But political editor of The Critic magazine, Henry Hill, has told LBC Miss Badenoch had a point.
Labour politicians call Tory politicians names all the time. And it is absurd for them to get on their high horses about this. This one wasn't particularly egregious, as they go. And if you want to, live by the sword, you end up dying by the sword. I think it is a perfectly legitimate allegation to make. It might be wrong, in which case Labour can defend it on the substance. But we are talking about an education secretary here who cancelled GCSE Latin mid-term.
Rachel Reeves is backing Andy Burnham to become the next Prime Minister, though it's widely expected he will replace her. The Makerfield MP is currently unopposed in the race to take over from Sir Keir Starmer after he announced his resignation on Monday. Baroness Cathy Ashton is a former Vice President of the European Commission on Human Rights. She's told Andrew Marr Mr Burnham will have to decide what he wants his relationship to be with Europe.
Is the political choice that actually the best way to get economic growth is a bigger, stronger relationship with Europe? And if so, what does that mean? And telling the country and explaining that and actually promoting it will be a big part of what he has to think about. On the other hand, there'll be plenty of people saying, well, it's not the only thing. There's lots you can do elsewhere. So trying to sort of balance that will be an interesting part of developing his foreign policy.
And Ryanair says it's making seats available at the back of its planes where parents can sit with their children for free. The airlines face criticism for charging them a mandatory fee to sit together. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 68 points at 10,529. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.16. LBC weather, heavy thundery rain pushing southeast from Scotland tonight. More storms developing in the southwest, a low of 10. Sunny spells for most tomorrow with a few scattered showers in the north and east. Thundery rain for northern Scotland, highs of 38 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
Good evening, everybody. I am in for Ian Dale again tonight. He will be back in this chair on Monday at 7 o'clock. And as we come on the air this evening, we have breaking news to bring you, because if you thought the drama within Sir Keir Starmer's administration was over because he's about to leave office, think again. Within the last few minutes, LBC has confirmed that the Prime Minister has been asked by Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood to sack Immigration Minister Mike Tapp. To get the details on this story, I'm joined live in the studio by LBC's political correspondent Bethany Dawson. More very unexpected drama, Bethany. What do we know?
We thought the drama was done and we thought everybody would be wrapping up for the week. But no, Mike Tapp, the Home Secretary, has asked Keir Starmer to sack Immigration Minister Mike Tapp. And I understand, after speaking to sources in the Home Office, that this is to do with an op-ed, an article that was not cleared by the Home Office team that was exploring policies that were not meant to yet be published. This is a breach of the ministerial code, hence the request for the firing.
So the understanding here is that he wrote an article for The Times in which he argued that foreign care workers should be exempt from the immigration reforms that his boss, Shabana Mahmood, is preparing. That is an article that was apparently not cleared under normal circumstances. It would have been cleared by senior figures within the department. It went to The Times. It wasn't published in The Times, but they found out that this article existed. And as a result, Shabana Mahmood is basically saying to the Prime Minister, get rid of him because he's advocating something that is not government policy, correct?
Or indeed not yet government policy. There is an expectation that ministers and their secretaries of state can have conversations about policy without it going public. But it seems as though that Shabana Mahmood and Mike Tapp, as a team would do, were having these conversations. Shabana Mahmood and her team had no idea that Mike Tapp was going to be writing an article until she got a telephone call from The Times asking if she'd like to comment, and now we're in this position.
And for our viewers and listeners who don't follow politics as closely as you do, put Mike Tapp into perspective. He's a pretty controversial, pretty pugnacious figure on his merits, right?
So Mike Tapp was elected to the Labour Party in the 2024 election, so still relatively new. He's the MP for Dover and Deal, an area very affected by small boats crisis. Since he's become an MP, he's been very outspoken about the small boats crisis, really been an advocate for the government's immigration reforms and indeed their focus on smashing the gangs. But he is to the right of the Labour Party, and anybody on the right of the Labour Party is essentially a controversial figure. And recently he has been advocating for new legislation that would cause a general election if a Prime Minister changed hands. That within itself is controversial, but crucially is not the reason that Shabana Mahmood has asked for the Prime Minister to fire him.
But he also, I see, said that if Andy Burnham wins the leadership of the Labour Party, which obviously he is going to do, that Andy Burnham should call a general election. I mean, he backs the idea that you can't engage in this regicide and the coronation of Andy Burnham without Mr. Burnham then pretty rapidly going to the country.
My understanding is that the thought behind this policy pitch is that it is to stop the kind of revolving door of prime ministers that we've become so used to. But as you say, it really sounds like a sort of continued regicide, a political point against Andy Burnham rather than a soothing of a broken system.
In writing this article and making this argument that care workers should be exempt from some of the immigration restrictions and plans that the government is drawing up, do we think he was just out there freelancing? Was this a trial balloon? Was he trying to? Is he like Lassie trying to send us a message? What's that all about?
Well, the crucial thing we should say is that we have been in touch with Mike Tapp for a comment, and we've not yet heard from him. I think he might be having quite a busy evening. But
he's going to have time on his hands after that, but carry on.
But from speaking to people close to Shabana, the understanding was that he was freelancing, as you say. You know, if you look at headlines at the moment, if we take a step back around politics, you will notice that a lot of people are pitching themselves for jobs within Andy Burnham's cabinet, whether that's Secretary of State jobs, whether that's ministerial jobs. People are doing a lot of freelancing at the moment. There's an element where that's very expected in this kind of time of uncertainty, but this clearly in the eyes of the Home Secretary overstepped the mark.
So now we're in a position where the Prime Minister, who has been waxing lyrical about leaving the country in a better state than the state in which he found it, is very much thinking about legacy, focused on wrapping things up, getting this leadership campaign over and done with faster than some people anticipated. Now he's got to go and find an immigration minister to fill that post on a caretaker basis for maybe 3 weeks?
You know, this is going to be an interesting test because MPs have been in and out of Andy Burnham's office since he got there on Monday. There may be a world, and I am freelancing here, but where there is a conversation with Andy Burnham, because it would kind of make sense not to have an immigration minister for just a few weeks, because as you say, I mean, that's kind of a bizarre situation to be in. We already have a few ministers that are kind of in caretaker positions, but this is just adding chaos to that will really bookend Keir Starmer's time as Prime Minister is just crazy.
It is an extraordinary development. Stay there, because we're going to come back to you in just a second. That's Bethany Dawson, LBC's political correspondent, with the breaking news tonight that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is asking Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer to fire Immigration Minister Mike Tapp for apparently scribing an article for The Times in which Mr. Tapp advocates that he believes that foreign care workers should be exempt from immigration reforms. His boss, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, who herself, of course, has an uncertain future. Is Andy Burnham going to keep her as Home Secretary? Is he thinking perhaps of making a Chancellor of the Exchequer? She was unaware, apparently, of this article having been written and been submitted to The Times, which itself is a potential breach of the ministerial code, because all of these articles are supposed to be cleared upwards by officials before they get submitted. She is now asking Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer to fire the Immigration Minister, Mike Tapp. We will keep following that story throughout the evening, but also we want to now lay our stall out for what we were planning to talk about this hour. And it did not take long, did it, for President Trump to proffer his first Oval Office kicking in the direction of Andy Burnham.
I hear he's extremely liberal, extremely. So that means he probably won't open up the North Sea. You know, I gave Keir Starmer some pretty good advice. I said, open up the North Sea.
And then we were off on the familiar storyline that if only Sir Keir Starmer had listened to him, allowed drilling in the North Sea, sealed off Britain's borders, he wouldn't be about to depart number 10. There was even a point in which Donald Trump claimed entirely falsely that he had helped nudge Starmer out of office, which is very similar to his entirely false claim that he was responsible for the Brexit result 10 years ago. It's all sort of Walter Mitty stuff. He's always the hero of his own story. But his comments yesterday do raise a big question. What kind of foreign policy should Andy Burnham pursue? Because we've got a few clues and hints about where he wants to take the country in domestic terms. More money on defence, a big push of resources to the regions, bringing public transport, energy and water companies back towards public ownership. But on foreign policy, we don't know very much. And to be fair to Mr. Burnham, as Mayor of Greater Manchester, he did lead trade delegations overseas, but he wasn't required to take much of a stance on the major international issues that he will soon be confronting. Although he did take a stand on January the 6th, 2021, after Donald Trump's supporters engaged in their deadly riot on Capitol Hill. Mr. Burnham took to Twitter, writing, "Any UK politician who gave Trump the time of day should be ashamed right now." Now Andy Burnham is going to be the politician in the UK who will have to decide whether he's going to give Donald Trump the time of day. How do you want him to handle the American president? More of a softly approach like that adopted by Sir Keir? Or do you want him to go full Georgia Maloney, tear up the playbook, see what happens if we actually try taking a tougher line? And more broadly on other issues, how should he handle Europe, the Middle East, Iran, Ukraine? We've spent a lot of time talking about his pick for number 11 Downing Street, the next Chancellor. But who do you want him to appoint as Foreign Secretary? Because it seems unlikely that Andy Burnham wants to follow in Sir Keir's footsteps and basically do that job himself. Your views this hour on where Andy Burnham takes Britain in the world and who he puts in charge of steering those policies. Should he keep Yvette Cooper in post? Think about bringing David Miliband back to run things, perhaps from the House of Lords. Who is your pick to head the Foreign Office? You're also welcome to call us if you've got any thoughts on the news that Mike Tapp is poised to be fired as the country's immigration minister. You can call us at 0345 6060 973. It is the same number for WhatsApp as it is for the phones. You can also text us at 84850. Back to the very busy Bethany Dawson, LBC's political correspondent. Bethany, before we go back just for updates on Mike Tapp, on this issue of Andy Burnham, foreign policy, he's a bit of a blank page, not an entirely blank page. Do we have any indication of what kind of direction he is likely to take?
The issue is, to a lot of questions about policy, the answer with Andy Burnham at the moment is we don't know, especially, though, when it comes to kind of international issues. When he was in government, he had incredibly domestic briefs. And in his brief of Mayor of Greater Manchester, of course, that was very domestic. So he is currently kind of really building this international brief. But what he's going to do on things like international aid, we don't know. In terms of things like how he will handle Ukraine, indeed the war in the Middle East or wars in the Middle East, we just don't know.
And what about Foreign Secretary? Where do you think that's heading?
I would love to say I would love to say something different than I don't know, I'm afraid. You know, I asked around today and lots of names were lobbed at me, which I was very grateful for. But it was kind of agreed that everyone suggesting a name was kind of playing fantasy cabinet here. It was not that anybody had any inkling. There are a lot of very talented people that would do a good job. However, who exactly it will be is still all up in the air.
Fantasy cabinet. I bet that's a game that's being played wildly on the predictive markets. Any more news about Mike Tapp?
We should note that we haven't spoken to number 10, so we understand that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has asked the Prime Minister to fire the Immigration Minister. However, what number 10 are going to do with that request is still to be seen. So I might pop out and make a phone call.
And then pop back when you know a bit more. Lovely. Yeah. Bethany Dawson, LBC's political correspondent, joining me live in the studio. So now it's over to you. What kind of foreign policy would you like Andy Burnham to pursue as Prime Minister? And who should he pick as Foreign Secretary? Tony's texted in to say Sir Keir Starmer should be Foreign Secretary, but, says Tony, I'm guessing that he might not be that keen on the idea. I don't know, Tony. I think he might be very keen on the idea, theoretically. Whether he'd be keen on the idea in a Burnham administration, I'm not entirely sure. Also joining me on the programme this evening, I'm delighted to welcome Greg Swenson to the programme, the chair of Republicans Overseas UK. Mr. Swenson, thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme. So we found this ancient posting on social media dating back to January the 6th, 2021 from Andy Burnham, indicating that he thought that any UK politician who gave Trump the time of day should be ashamed right now. Is that going to constrain not only Andy Burnham, but the nature of his relationship with the US president? Good evening to you.
Good evening. No, it's nice to be with you. I don't think it will. You know, look, there's no shortage of people who are on record of saying nasty things about the president. You know, you also had a lot of old tweets come up during the Henry Nowak situation a few weeks ago of people who piled on to the George Floyd bandwagon, but yet didn't want to make the same sort of comments about Henry Nowak. So, you know, look, I don't think that will hurt the relationship with the president, because just about everybody on the left had similar criticisms in social media. So I don't think so. OK,
but Greg, when you heard what the president said yesterday about Andy Burnham, he's extreme, he's been the mayor of a town, I mean, as though, you know, Manchester is like Poughkeepsie, which clearly it isn't, and he's very unlikely to approve drilling in the North Sea. I mean, actually, we all know that Andy Burnham is quite likely to approve drilling in the North Sea. Nonetheless, unless he seals the country's borders, he's not going to meet the Trump mark, is he?
I don't think so. I don't think you could expect anyone in labor or, you know, parties of the left to meet that. And I understand that there's political differences. We have a Republican government, and, you know, right now, and in the UK, it's a Labour government. So I don't think anyone should be surprised that, you know, that Andy Burnham won't line up, you know, 100% with the president's playbook. But I do think that at least liberating the energy sector to a certain degree will definitely win some favor with him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think maybe even digging for natural gas would be useful. So I think, the president is very fond of the UK, and that's something that, we've seen in both terms. And I think that he criticizes, yes, he's very unfiltered that way, but he actually does care. He cares about mass migration. He cares about the energy sector because he sees UK businesses paying 4 times for energy that we pay here in the US. And so, that's troubling to the president. It also shows you that, we had similar problems 4 years ago. We had hostility to the private sector in general, but especially to energy. We had censorship and collaboration of censorship between the social media companies and the White House. We've had all these similar issues, and we're able to fix them in a very short amount of time. So I think what the president's trying to communicate, and you heard this from Sarah Rogers yesterday at the ARC conference as well, is that these are all problems that we've experienced here in the US. So those criticisms aren't made from some point of like snobbery, like we're so good here, we got everything right. We didn't, but the president was able to fix a lot of these challenges, and he's done that in just, the year and a half that he's been in office.
And Greg, just briefly, with regard to the Trump administration's national security strategy, it specifically says that the only place it finds optimism in Europe is in the rise of patriotic European political parties. And by that, the Trump administration clearly does not mean Labour.
No, that's pretty sure. That's pretty clear in the strategy. And there's definitely a pivot from Western Europe to the Gulf region, from Western Europe to the Pacific. But I do think that, that he is pretty clear about the fact that, the parties of the right, the more populist parties, are doing well. They're not necessarily leading governments right now, but, except with the exception being in Italy. And so I think he has great hopes for Western Europe, but I'm not sure he's that confident that it will work. And we'll see. There's always 2029 in the UK.
Greg Swenson, thanks very much indeed for being on the programme tonight. Greg Swenson is the chair of Republicans Overseas UK. And of course, when we say that Donald Trump is not particularly interested in forging a positive relationship more broadly with Labour, that's because he really is interested in trying to create a situation in which either Nigel Farage or Rupert Lowe, or maybe a coalition of the two of them, end up in government to replace Andy Burnham. Your call's next on LBC. You know the numbers. It's 22 minutes past 7.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why do you need consultation? Who's going to say no?
Straight to the point.
Let's see.
Why let's see? This is what I don't understand.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Why won't they listen to the most successful living Labour Prime Minister? Arguably the most successful Labour Prime Minister of all time.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store.
And they have made it clear that it is for the Prime Minister to make any decision on that.
It would be unusual for the Prime Minister to be requested by the Home Secretary to fire a minister and for the Prime Minister not to act on that, wouldn't it?
Normally, and I do agree with you. However, we are in unusual circumstances right now where we're kind of at a point where we accept there is going to be a new Prime Minister in 3 weeks without a contest or indeed an election. So there, maybe unusual times mean just unusual choices. But it seems as though we will have updates within the next few hours, the next few days.
I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon.
I
Bethany
hope so.
Dawson, LBC's political correspondent. Thanks very much for that. Let's go to the phone lines and talk about Andy Burnham and foreign policy and what choice you want him to make for the post of Foreign Secretary. Simon is in Southampton tonight. Good evening, Simon.
Hello, Simon.
Yes, we've got, again tonight on the programme, we've got a quorum of Simons. It's very good news.
Too many. You can never have.
You can't.
Right, a little unknown MP I would like to see as Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, go on.
A little unknown, not many people have heard of him. His name's Keir Starmer. He's already proved himself that he's amazing at that job.
Look, I mean, I think, there's a lot. We've had, as I said earlier, we've had listeners texting in with a similar idea. And there's no doubt, I think, Simon, he's definitely very steeped in foreign policy. Arguably, he enjoys the foreign stuff more than the domestic stuff, right?
Well, yeah, but he's got all the right policies on Ukraine. And I would prefer it if he didn't have any desire to put a sort of a stumbling block in the way of that, really. If that could just be a continuation, that would be great.
But what are the optics of that, though? I mean, imagine going into that cabinet meeting every week and you are Andy Burnham, who has toppled Sir Keir Starmer, and you are Sir Keir Starmer, who has fallen victim to that toppling. That's going to be pretty awkward, isn't it?
Well, unfortunately, yeah, but as Starmer says, it's not about him or the party; it's about the country. So if he means what he says about the country, then you can call it a penance, if you like, for being a not very good prime minister. Because he certainly let me down, and I know he's let a few others down.
Now,
he was going to be the best.
When you say that, what did you think of what Sir Keir said over the last few hours, arguing that he's leaving the country in a better place than the state in which he found it?
Well, do you know what? He probably is, right? And I'm talking to someone on the left, and he probably is. But the point is, the whole point of Keir Starmer, the reason why it hasn't worked, is because nobody knows. Doesn't tell anybody. There's no comms. There's no shouting about your achievements, nothing. It's as if they're embarrassed when they achieve something. And unfortunately, for all of the people calling in to say, oh, we've got to have a general election and everything else, we don't. The point is, if this government fails, then we all fail, because there is nowhere else to go if this government fails. It means that Frogface will get in at the next election, and we're going to all be in trouble. And that brings me on to Donald Trump.
Go on.
I would hope, I don't know whether it's realistic or not, but I would hope that Andy Burnham actually tells the truth. And when Trump starts going on about his energy and his fossil fuels and everything else and his immigration, I would love it for a prime minister to say, we're in a climate emergency and we are sticking with our green policy, and B, immigration is good for this country and we will not be locking our borders down. Now, you either deal with that, Mr. Trump, or you don't. That's up to you, but that is the truth. Can you imagine how this country would feel, the majority of this country would feel, if for once a prime minister or a minister told the truth, and because it's the truth, we know it's the truth, we would be like, oh, thank God. What a breath of fresh air.
I agree with you, except that I'm not sure Andy Burnham shares that view of clean energy. He looks like he's going to be much more embracing the Tony Blair line that net zero's got to take a back seat right now. We've got to drill for oil and gas in the North Sea because we need the economic assist to get the energy prices down.
Well, at the end of the day, we don't know yet. And as long as the official line is that we will be working towards net zero, but we will be including, you've got to be sensible. So you've got to have the fossil fuels in that mix as well. And if he feels that that is what we need to do in order to maintain that for whatever reason, the thing is, I will listen to Andy Burnham. I trust him. And if he tells me the reason why he's doing X, Y, Z, until I have reason to disbelieve him or doubt him. Look, I'm on record on this radio station of saying that more than one occasion that I believe that Keir Starmer will be the best thing that ever happened to this country. I was wrong about that. I voted for Brexit. I was very wrong about that. So I have an opinion now on Andy Burnham, and hey, I may be wrong again.
You might be wrong again. Simon, thanks very much indeed for sharing it with us on the programme this evening. Simon in Southampton kicking us off. Robert in Stamford-le-Hope has texted, I want Keir as Foreign Secretary and I want Andy to start as soon as possible the process of rejoining the EU. I'm not sure you're going to get either of those outcomes, but let me know what you all think. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. It's 29 minutes to 8, and the news headlines come from Amelia Cox.
London Ambulance Service says it recorded the highest number of life-threatening emergencies in its history yesterday. Another record has been broken for the hottest June day today, with temperatures reaching 36.7 degrees Celsius in Somerset. A jury has found a teenage boy not guilty of the murder and manslaughter of a 9-year-old girl in Weston-super-Mare. Aria Thorpe died from a single stab wound at her home in December last year. And it's claimed more than 24,000 people are unaccounted for in Venezuela after 2 earthquakes. So far, 164 people are known to have died. LBC weather, heavy thundery rain pushing southeast from Scotland tonight. More storms developing in the southwest, a low of 10 degrees.
LBC.
One vote for David Miliband. Anthony's texted to say David Miliband would be excellent, well experienced in the issues that are coming up in the next 5 to 10 years. This is not in any way a scientific poll, but it clearly indicates that an awful lot of you think that Keir Starmer should find a way of staying in government and helming the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Let's go to David in Uxbridge. Good evening, David.
Yeah, hi Simon. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I don't know who the kind of personality is, but I think what Britain really needs to do is move away from the kind of what I call the Atlanticist foreign policy. And I know that's not easy because Britain has a far more dependent relationship than other European countries. But I think we are so dependent on America for our security, our military and our tech. All our critical infrastructure, we're dependent on the tech oligarchs in America. And I think that's a big problem that we need to address. I also think an issue that Burnham will find very hard, he'll be pulled in different directions, is over Israel and Palestine, because I think to win back the left, that is such an important issue. And I think he'll have to move on that towards sanctions on Israel. But I think that's unlikely because the British security establishment and the right wing of the Labour and all the kind of the pro-Israel groups are very strong in Britain. So I think he's going to face quite but I don't think he'll win back a lot. If he comes out on continuity Starmer on that issue, I think he'll have a problem to unite the voters he needs to win. So I think watch out for that.
Well, I think, David, I think it's very interesting what you're saying in terms of his possible policies towards the Middle East, because the most recent comments that he's made about the Middle East came in a Guardian interview a little bit earlier this month, about 3 weeks ago, in which he declined to call Israel's actions a genocide, saying that he can't judge things of that enormity from where I am as mayor of Greater Manchester. But he did say that he had concerns, and this is a quote, about the disproportionate nature of what has happened in terms of the destruction, and said that there must be a full process of investigation and accountability. So that was on June the 4th.
Yeah.
It's now June the 25th. By the time we get to July the 25th, he will be in Downing Street, and he will not be able to say that he can't make a judgment about something of that enormity from where he is as Mayor of Greater Manchester, because he may be required to make a judgment of something of that enormity as Prime Minister.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think he's copping out, because that's what he's saying is more or less continuity Starmer. And I think the overwhelming evidence of war crimes, breaches of international law, crimes against humanity and genocide is pretty overwhelming. So, and I think unless he really speaks to those issues, I think he will lose a lot of the vote. Because I don't think the political establishment know that issue now for a certain younger generation, a certain cohort of vote, are significant, that, you know, they can't believe that Britain is allied with a state that has committed these crimes and still regards it as an ally.
Well,
but you've got the British security establishment is so entwined with Israel. So I think how he navigates that conflict will be interesting. And my view is I think he'll go continuity Starmer, and I think he'll lose votes on that, but watch this space.
Absolutely. And we will. David in Uxbridge, thanks very much indeed. I think there's no question that the Middle East will, of course, always be a very complicated thicket for anyone who is running the government in this country. And it's about to become a complicated thicket for Prime Minister Andy Burnham once he becomes Prime Minister. We're going to take more of your calls, lots of you calling in on this topic in a moment. But first, I want to get an update on today's dreadful twin earthquakes in Venezuela. The first was magnitude 7.2, the second 7.5. They struck within seconds of each other near the town of San Felipe. That's roughly 100 miles west of Caracas, toppling more than 160 buildings in the Venezuelan capital, shutting the country's main international airport. The United States says it's deploying search and rescue teams and humanitarian assistance. Let's get an update now from Catherine Ellis, freelance journalist covering Venezuela and Colombia. She joins us from the Colombian city of Cúcuta at the Venezuelan border. Catherine Ellis, thanks very much indeed for being with us on LBC this evening. I know you're trying to get to Venezuela, but what are you hearing about the latest situation in Caracas? Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah, no, I'm just starting to hear from some people that I hadn't heard from, actually. It was quite worrying, even for me, because, it's the next day now and some of my messages weren't getting through to people. Luckily, most of the people that I've contacted, they are starting to get back to me. A couple of them, so one guy that I know, he had to evacuate his building. He slept in his car. I texted him this morning and I said, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm going to go out and help look for bodies. And that's what people are doing. That's become the norm now. Schools are closed. These are like humanitarian rescue centres where people are sleeping, where they're eating because they can't go back to their homes because it's too dangerous. There's been a lot of aftershocks as well. But people are just in complete shock, just complete shock, and they don't know what's going to come next. This is a country that was starting to have a little bit of hope. They thought the economy is going to improve, things are going to get better. There was going to be elections. They really, really held that hope. And now it's kind of just this big, dark, black cloud, and a lot of them can't get in touch with their families.
Do we have any sense of how high the death toll may go here? I saw some modelling by the US Geological Survey, I think it was, that was suggesting that these two earthquakes, the strongest ever to hit Venezuela back to back, there was a more than 30% chance that the death toll could reach above 100,000.
I mean, I've been seeing those same figures as well. And when I saw them for the first time, I was shocked. Literally, it took my breath away. We don't know yet. Authorities are saying they're being very cautious with it, but that's gonna keep rising. The very difficult thing is there's a lot of people that are missing at the minute, and we don't know if they're missing because they're genuinely missing or that they just don't have phone signal. They haven't got phone battery. Local residents have actually set up a site for people who are disappeared, so families can log them. I think there's about 30,000 people registered on that site now. Like, everybody's just waiting. We really don't know, but it's worrying from what I'm hearing. You know, people are saying there are either people stuck under the rubble or they can hear people. And when you look at the pictures, it's just incredible. Like, these are kind of, a lot of them are high-rise buildings, not only in Caracas but north of Caracas, on Guaira and on the coast and near the airport. And the airport itself was affected. I can't even fly to the airport because it's completely closed. So we're going to see it increase a lot. I don't know how much, but it's very worrying.
And I was noticing today that before the earthquake struck, Venezuela was staring at a $240 billion national debt, which is a staggering number on its merits, but it's also twice the size of its annual economy. This is a country that is going to struggle to engage in rescue efforts, is going to need an awful lot of outside help. And then how it begins to rebuild under crippling debt that it's already facing is going to be a monumental issue.
Completely. And I think people, you know, at the minute that's not kind of what they're worrying about, but they will start to worry about that a lot. And at the minute, the international community seems to be coming out and saying that they're going to help and they're going to send search and rescue teams and, you know, can help financially. But how far does that go? We don't really know. We don't know, you know, we can see the extent of the damage, but we really don't know what that is yet, what that's actually going to cost. But apart from actually rebuilding the country, it's like people's lives as well. Like, you know, people like in Venezuela, people worry about putting food on the table, like what they're going to eat. And hospitals, like I was thinking today, like the hospitals will be overwhelmed. Normally when people from Venezuela, they go to hospital, they have to pay for not only the medicine, but even the gloves that the doctors and nurses wear or the alcohol that they use. They have to use every last kind of bit of their money just on these resources. So it's a really worrying situation for all of them.
Catherine, I'm enormously grateful to you. Good luck in the days ahead and making your journey there. That's Catherine Ellis, freelance journalist covering Venezuela and Colombia, talking to us from the Colombian city of Cúcuta at the Venezuelan border. I've personally been lucky enough to go to Caracas, I think, 3 times over the course of the last several years. It is an extraordinary city. It is a city that has had so much wealth removed from it because during the Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro era, wealthy Venezuelans left, took their money with them and ended up in the United States. And it is also a city with some pretty significant informal housing settlements in various neighborhoods. And one wonders how on earth those settlements could possibly have not been flattened by the scale of this earthquake. It's a significant story. And of course, it comes at a time when in this country and in the United States, we have cut humanitarian assistance budgets. That may be an issue that you'd like to ask our cross-question panel about coming up in about 15 minutes' time here on LBC. The Thursday edition of Cross Question. Our guests will be Baroness Tina Stowell, Conservative Party peer, Baroness Natalie Bennett, Green Party peer, Andrew Fisher, the journalist and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, and Sebastian Payne, leader writer and columnist at The Times. Not too early to call us with your questions or text them in for Cross Question, which begins after the 8 o'clock news. The time on LBC and across the country now, 7:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Closing schools and sending children home is not going to help their education. I'm not saying that means that everybody tries to tolerate stuffy classrooms. We need to get to a position where we start to get aircon units in. If you don't teach them resilience at school, where are they going to learn it? And if they see the lesson as a child, when things get a bit tough, we just shut up shop. We just don't go to work. We just close everything down. All this will do is cause more problems for our children as they grow up because they will have no resilience.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
should be exempted from some of the immigration rules that Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, has been drawing up. Let's go to the phone lines on that issue. Ty is on the phone from Clapham. Good evening, Ty.
Good evening, Simon. I think the Home Secretary, she's so wrong in this one. For a simple reason. She's asking a limbed-up Prime Minister who was a victim of a coup d'etat, which brings his government into disrepute, to sack somebody when he has already resigned, giving a date of his own departure. It doesn't make sense.
Well, but I think from the Home Secretary's perspective, Ty, there would be a vulnerability and the government would be leaving themselves open to attack if a minister in the government broke the ministerial code and was not disciplined as a result of doing that. Now, I don't want to go so far as to saying that that is what Mike Tapper's done, because we still don't know his side of the story.
No, it's irrelevant.
But that's clearly what Shabana Mahmood has concluded.
No, it's irrelevant at this point in time, because what happened, a wrong precedent has been set in the Labour Party, which anybody can come up tomorrow and say, I want to be the Prime Minister. This man that is supposed to be the circle Prime Minister is very disheartening to me as a Labour Party member, because what has happened is this. He's setting a precedent which will damage Labour Party in the future. Anybody can come up and say, I would like to be Prime Minister. This man has run twice for the same position. This is the third time. It's a coup. If it happened in another country, that's what we said, a coup d'etat.
OK, well, I understand that you're not happy about Andy Burnham supplanting the Prime Minister, but there's no rule that says the ministerial code ceases to be operational during an interregnum between one Prime Minister and the next. I mean, you sign the ministerial code, you honour the ministerial code, and if you don't, you pay some kind of price for that. And that appears to be what Shabana Mahmood is asking the Prime Minister now to do. I mean, I think they would be putting themselves at risk of enormous criticism from opposition parties if they didn't at least have a very serious conversation about Mr. Tapp's future, no?
Yeah, but all this minister in the present government, they are defunct because a departure date has been given.
I know, but they're not defunct. But they're not defunct. They are, Ty, still in charge of their ministries and their portfolios. I mean, if there was suddenly, I don't know, a Russian attack on the Baltic states tonight, it would be Sir Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper as Foreign Secretary who would be in charge of responding to that. They're still in post until the very moment that Keir Starmer walks out of number 10 and Andy Burnham moves in.
Well, I don't think they can do anything. They only got 3 weeks in the office. What's the point of firing anyone? They are going anyway.
Well, we don't know if they are all going, Ty. That's another big question. Are they all going, or is Andy Burnham going to keep some of them? Still lots of talk about maybe Ed Miliband for Chancellor, maybe Shabana Mahmood, maybe West Streeting, maybe someone else. And speaking of wild cards, several of you have been texting in with regard to the position of Foreign Secretary. John in Blackburn says Hilary Benn for Foreign Secretary, experienced, principled, articulate. He would restore credibility and gravitas to one of the great offices of state. And Chris has texted in with, one might argue, an even wilder card. Gordon Brown, sitting in the House of Lords, would make a good Foreign Secretary. Asks Chris. He puts a question mark at the end of that. Ty, I didn't say goodbye to you. Thanks very much indeed for calling the programme. It was good to hear from you. And it's good to hear now from Rose in Tavistock in Devon. Good evening, Rose.
Oh, hello, Simon. Well, I just feel that it's vitally important that Andy Burnham, or whoever the Foreign Secretary is, makes it absolutely clear that we do not appreciate US interference in our internal affairs, because it's been let go. And as that happens, it then increases by default. And this is, to me, is extremely dangerous in view of the policy document that you quoted earlier on. Countless comments and behaviours by Mr. Farage, whom Mr. Trump is clearly determined to get ruling us, which means, you must not underestimate and you cannot overestimate the link between these two. Trump ruling the world Farage recently said he admires the way Trump is running the world. Think about that for a minute. And Trump, he was terribly pleased because he'd given him this marvellous advice for if and when he becomes Prime Minister. Have fun doing it. Well, Mrs. Trump, we happen to be a serious country. And I feel that these matters need to be kept by the Prime Minister somehow to the fore for the public, because we are undergoing at the moment just a continuous pretense that none of this is happening whatsoever. I mean, we spent 3 days...
Well, I think we've normalised it, haven't we, Rose? I think we're at the point now where we have, because we have turned a blind eye to this stuff since Keir Starmer arrived in number 10 and Donald Trump was back in the White House in January of last year. It's sort of become normalised, the idea that, you know, Elon Musk can weigh in on British affairs at any point and there are no consequences for him, that Donald Trump can constantly sneer about Keir Starmer being no Winston Churchill, and publicly there's very, very little pushback from the government. We're still engaging in the old sort of softly task force routine in terms of trying to keep the relationship on the level, and you end up normalising the abnormal.
Well, yes, and it's not as if we forget about enormous things that have happened, like which tell us that unless we keep on standing up against this, we are just being smoothly run into a government by America through Farage. I mean, we had 3 days of radio adulation of someone we'd never heard of, because he was a white supremacist friend of Trump's who'd been assassinated, and who had said not that long before in Oxford, Nigel Farage will revolutionise Britain in the same way that Trump is revolutionising the States.
Yeah.
On the day of the opening of Parliament, Nigel Farage was allowed, without any media comment whatsoever, to skive off to America and traduce his own country and lie in front of Congress on oath about us being a totalitarian state. And all this is being ignored.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is
absolutely ludicrous.
It is an extraordinary set of circumstances, Rose. I will say that there will be people out there who will challenge your definition of Charlie Kirk as a white supremacist. You were referring there to the assassination of Charlie Kirk on the campus of Utah State University. Undoubtedly a very prominent influencer on the right and the far right of American politics. And I think there's no doubt whatsoever that, as I was saying on Andrew's programme this evening, you know, this new national security strategy of Donald Trump's finds optimism in Europe only in the rise of patriotic European political parties. And Charlie Kirk absolutely would have completely endorsed that viewpoint. They want a government in this country that is led either by Nigel Farage or Rupert Lowe, or a coalition of the two of them. And that is always going to constrain what Andy Burnham is able to achieve, even if he is able to warm the relationship up a little bit as a result of his affability. Rose, thanks for calling in. Always good to hear you. Let me go to Elliot in Cheadle. Good evening, Elliot.
Oh, hello, Simon. Nice to speak to you.
And to you.
Firstly, we must uphold our full, unequivocal support for Ukraine, financially and collectively with the European Union. Secondly, we must aim to find a negotiated agreement with the EU to align or affiliate our means of access to the customs union to make trade as simple as possible, which will increase our wealth and growth, plus access to the Schengen Agreement, which will give us freedom of movement throughout Europe. And if it comes to $1 billion plus, so be it. In relation to Trump, we should keep the status quo, but a lot will depend on the personal relationship between Burnham and Trump. To facilitate our relationship, I believe John Healey should be appointed as Foreign Secretary and Al Carnes as Defense Secretary, because of their very good relationship with J.D. Vance, Rubio and Hegseth, when Healey was Defence Secretary and Carnes was his deputy.
Elliot, can I ask you briefly, when you hear Andy Burnham has said in the past that he wants the UK to rejoin the EU in his lifetime, I don't know how old you are, Elliot. Andy Burnham's a much younger man than I am. I don't think his definition of in his lifetime necessarily includes mine.
Well, let me say to you, It is logical and sensible if we're going to pursue a sensible policy, both in European terms, international terms, and economic terms, to align or affiliate to Europe. We've got a very good person in Yvonne der Leyen, and she is very accessible. And I think we should take full advantage of the opportunity if it comes. I also believe Healey and Carnes will be a perfect double act to deal with the current regime that is in the White House.
Well, I think that's a very interesting idea about Healey and Carnes at the Ministry of Defence. I think that, we may well see that come to pass. Who knows? We'll see what happens. Elliot, thanks very much indeed for calling in. One text from Rob about the reports that Mike Tapp may be fired. Rob says Shabana Mahmood is spot on with wanting to sack Tapp. He's undermining his own team. His feet shouldn't touch the ground. And Rob goes on to say, if Starmer refuses, I'd take a stand, if he was Shabana Mahmood, and threaten to resign. She's the Home Secretary until she isn't and needs to run her ship tightly. We will find out what happens over the course of the next few hours. Now, coming up next, it's the Thursday edition of Cross Question, our nightly panel discussion where you get to set the agenda by asking anything you want. And joining me around the table tonight will be Baroness Tina Stowell, Conservative Party peer, Baroness Natalie Bennett, former Green Party leader, Andrew Fisher, journalist and former advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, and Sebastian Payne, leader, writer and columnist at The Times. You might have questions about almost anything relating to Andy Burnham, his imminent formation of a government, his decision to make a big economic policy speech on Monday in Manchester. What message is that sending? Or you might want to ask about Sir Keir Starmer and what he's going to do to Mike Tapp, or Sir Keir's claim today that he will be leaving the country better off than it was when he took over. Whatever is on your mind tonight, you can call 0345 6060 973, text your questions to 84850, and we'll get you the answers.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock, the UK has seen its record for the hottest June day broken for a fifth time in 2 days. Temperatures reached 36.7 degrees in Somerset earlier as a red warning for extreme heat extends into tomorrow. With thousands of schools closed or finished early and train operators running a reduced service again, it's prompted calls for more resilience. Dr. Hilary Williams from the Royal College of Physicians told LBC hospitals are also underprepared.
I think it's actually that the wards are probably some of the most vulnerable. We've got some very old wards. We've got patients crammed in together. And then you add in the heat, and I think that's probably one of the most vulnerable. I mean, we should not be looking after patients in temperatures of over 30 degrees. It's just not right, is it? It's not safe.
London Ambulance Service says it's recorded the highest number of life-threatening emergencies in its history yesterday. A teenage boy has been cleared of the murder and manslaughter of a 9-year-old girl from a single stab wound. Aria Thorpe died at her home in Weston-super-Mare in December last year. The 16-year-old, who can't be named because of his age, says they were playing with a knife when it happened. The number of people confirmed dead in 2 earthquakes in Venezuela has risen to 188. That figure is expected to rise, with tens of thousands of people reported missing. Catherine Ellis is a freelance journalist covering Colombia and Venezuela and told LBC people there are in shock.
They don't know what's going to come next. This is a country that was starting to have a little bit of hope. They thought the economy is going to improve, things are going to get better. There was going to be elections. They really, really held that hope. And now it's kind of just this big, dark, black cloud. And a lot of them can't get in touch with their family.
3 weeks tomorrow could be the day when Andy Burnham becomes the Prime Minister. According to Labour's leadership timetable, if there's only one candidate, he'll succeed Sir Keir Starmer on July the 17th. And a temporary cut in VAT to reduce prices at family attractions has come into effect. Legoland, Alton Towers and Peppa Pig World are some of the venues cutting entry fees. In the city, the FTSE 100s closed up 68 points at 10,529. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.16. LBC weather, heavy thundery rain pushing southeast from Scotland tonight. More storms developing in the southwest. A low of 10 degrees in Scotland, but a tropical night across much of England. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. This is Cross Question.
And it's Simon Marks in for Ian Dale once again tonight. This is Cross Question, where we give you the unfettered ability to set our agenda for the next hour of conversation here on LBC. Every evening at 8, we bring together a cracking panel to take your questions about whatever is on your mind. And this evening around the Cross Question table, I am joined by 2 baronesses and 2 writers. The baronesses first. Baroness Tina Stowell, Conservative Party peer and former leader of the House of Lords, a widely respected voice on media policy, technology and constitutional affairs. Baroness Natalie Bennett is here, Green Party peer and former leader of the Green Party of England and Wales. She's a former journalist at The Guardian and led the Greens from 2012 until 2016. Andrew Fisher is a columnist for the iPaper and a political strategist who served as Labour's Executive Director of Policy under Jeremy Corbyn, an influential voice on the Democratic left with interests in economic policy, public ownership and inequality. And we're joined by Sebastian Payne, a leader writer and columnist at The Times and one of Britain's leading political journalists. He's the author of 2 books, Broken Hearts, a look at the UK's ever-changing political landscape, and The Fall of Boris Johnson, which is, as the name suggests, about the former Prime Minister's downfall. So lots of very relevant, specialised knowledge around the table tonight at this exciting but somewhat uncertain moment in the UK's national story. You can ask them about pretty much anything relating to Andy Burnham and whether they think he's got the chops for the job, or about Sir Keir Starmer's departure, his record in office, the news tonight of the possible firing of Immigration Minister Mike Tapp. You might want to ask about UK international aid budgets given today's twin earthquake tragedy in Venezuela, or about Denmark's proposal to ban the Islamic call to prayer from being heard in public. You might even want to ask about the World Cup, because it's not coming home, is it? Whatever is on your agenda, you can place it on ours tonight. On Cross Question, it is your question that drives the conversation. And don't forget, you can listen to us on the radio or your mobile, or you can watch us in video on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC official YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
So first of all, thanks to you all for being here. It's great to have you. And we're going to go straight to our first question, which comes on text from Joanna in Chichester. She says, hospitals are declaring critical incidents, trains are being delayed, and kids are being told to stay home from school. What do we need to do as a country to make us better prepared to deal with things the next time it is this hot? As it will be again quite soon, without a doubt. Well, it will be tomorrow, and it's bound to be this hot again before very much longer. Baroness Tina Stowell, what do we need to do as a country to make us better prepared to deal with things the next time this happens?
Well, I think these extreme weather conditions that we're experiencing in the summer, but also what we experience in the winter, when we're now suffering extreme cold climates that we've not had to deal with in a consistent way in the past. To me, the first thing it requires us to do is to find ways to reduce the cost of our electricity, because we need to have cheaper energy in this country, because we are going to have to. I know this is not going to be easy, and this is going to take a bit of time. But if we are going to see these kind of temperatures persist in the summer months in the years ahead, we're going to have more air conditioning. Now, I know that will trigger Natalie, and no doubt she'll want to get into a debate about climate change and what have you. But of course, we need to make sure that we are deploying all forms of energy, including renewables. But we need to be able to take advantage of our own resources to get the price of electricity down, because without doing that, we're not going to have the options that we need and the cooling arrangements that are going to be necessary for us to function.
Drill, baby, drill in the North Sea?
Yes.
Oil and gas?
Yes.
No question about it in your mind?
No.
Do you think Andy Burnham's going to do that?
Well, I struggle to keep up with Andy Burnham's views on any of these big policy questions. I would like to think that he would. I think that he should. But he doesn't seem to be distancing himself from Ed Miliband in any way. And we know that Ed Miliband is the reason why this Prime Minister and the Labour government so far have resisted doing that. So if he remains part of the picture, then I think that it will be surprising, as much as I would want Andy Burnham to do it, to actually get on.
Natalie Bennett, I think you're going to have a different set of policy prescriptions.
Well, I am beyond astonished that today, of all days, a Conservative would come on here and say, drill, baby, drill. That's what created the problem we have now, our use of fossil fuels. Plus, that's the expensive way in which we will make it more expensive to people when they need to have air conditioning to cool their homes, when they need to heat their homes. That's the most expensive option, the most unreliable option. Renewables are the reliable, secure energy future where we know what they're going to cost. But I think coming back to that air conditioning point and looking around the country, the Guardian was reporting on hospitals, doctors from a range of hospitals sobbing to the Guardian saying, we can't treat our patients properly because our buildings are unsuitable. I regularly go into schools, so many schools, they've had to send pupils home because of the way they've been built. What we need to do is focus on resilience. That means changing where we can our buildings, making sure that nothing we put up new is built the way things are still being built now, utterly unsuitable for the climate emergency, the conditions we're in now. And Tina talked about the winter. Of course, floods are a huge thing here. And the other thing that's got to be raised is drought. This conditions, we haven't heard much reporting on this, it's going to be terrible for our farmers. And food security. I've been questioning the government, challenging the government, saying, what are you going to do about food security in this climate emergency? I asked them about getting a store of food so that in an emergency, the government can actually feed people, at least for a little while. Switzerland has 3 months' supply and is looking to go to 12. And the government said, we think the market will always supply our food. That's such a dangerous complacency.
Sebastian Payne.
Let me be terribly consensual by saying you've both got good points here about what needs to be done. To start off with your point about buildings, Natalie, you're completely right in this sense that insulation is kind of the easiest thing that can be done. I think the UK has one of the worst, if not the worst, insulated housing stocks within Europe. And that's obviously not just about keeping heat in during the winter and saving energy, but keeping it out as well. And we've got to realise that our housing stock is pretty old in this country in many places, and that is costly. We've been through several rounds of government grants about how to deal with that. So I agree with you on that. But to the point about air conditioning, and Tina, I think you are right on that. I used to live in Washington, D.C., and this is basically what it was like every single day when you used to have to haul yourself outside and you'd walk to the end of the block and you'd be drained in sweat before you get there. And the way you deal with that is by having air conditioning in buildings. And we've been quite slow on this country because it's obviously hard to do because the buildings are old. It's expensive as well. But we're going to have to realise this, unfortunately, is the new norm. Even if we were to get rid of all our carbon emissions tomorrow, we're still going to see the temperature of the world increase, and we're going to have to find ways of adapting our homes and our infrastructure. And I think that is going to mean more air conditioning now.
Well, I do live in Washington, D.C., and one of the reasons why I came here was to try and escape that. And I've flown into this.
I want to bid against Washington, D.C. and put in Bangkok in Thailand, where I lived for 5 years. And there was traditional architecture in Thailand that was perfectly comfortable in conditions in Thailand, which are extremely hot and extremely humid, if the buildings were built in the right way. So it's perfectly possible to build buildings for these kind of conditions.
We can't knock all our buildings down.
No, but one of the other things, and I'm going to give listeners a tip here, because actually a lot of our Victorian buildings...
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Perfectly good. One of the things people don't know, sash windows, leave them open equal amount top and bottom, and it's nearly as effective as air conditioning. The hot air goes out the top, and provided it's cooler outside, the cool air comes in the bottom.
We did an hour on this last night, and we had a teacher calling in saying the Victorian schools are much more ready to be ventilated and cooled than the modern blocks that exist. Andrew Fisher, let me ask you for your view to answer Joanna's question. What do we need to do as a country to make us better prepared to deal with things the next time this happens, as in tomorrow?
I'm not sure there's a lot we can do policy-wise by tomorrow, but I think we have to start by accepting this is not extreme anymore. This is the new normal. It's been like this for several years. I mean, if you look at the hottest years on record, the hottest days on record, however you measure it, the vast majority have been in the last, 10, 20 years in this country. 1976 people bang on about. That's not even in the top 10 hottest days anymore on British record. So, we are in a new world. We have to adapt to that. As well as try and mitigate against further climate change as well. Both those things are things we can do. We've got to do them simultaneously. I completely agree. You've got to invest in renewable, cheaper energy. We have the most expensive bills in Europe for our businesses, but I think the second most for domestic use. So we've got to get energy prices down, both for summer and winter, for the reasons that we do need to realise we are not living in a kind of moderate climate anymore. It is going to be more extreme. And that does mean investment. It means investment in flood defences. It means investment in the fire and rescue service because there are more wildfires now. There are a whole range of things that we are just not set up for. And it's a lack of investment in buildings as well over decades. This is not the fault of any one government. This goes back a long way. We have failed to invest and prepare for this. And it's hitting us now. And it's going to keep hitting us harder and harder and harder until we do. So it's going to take long-term investment, which means you've got to make a case about how you fund that, how you raise. I mean, it can be a growth industry. We've got huge amount of work to do, huge amount of skill in this country. If we combine the two, it's not beyond the wit of man to kind of overcome this challenge either.
It's all going to come down to cost. And Tina Stoll, the Green Party today, and we're going to be talking about this in our next hour on the programme as well, proposed that there should be maximum temperatures written into law. And once you hit them, people should not be required to remain in work. The Spanish have already done this. Sir Sadiq Khan yesterday was talking about the possibility of creating maximum and minimum temperatures. So when it gets too cold or too hot, schools shut down, send the kids home. People in the workplace are told they don't have to work, particularly those people working out of doors. What's your view on that? Because that's going to put a huge burden on the economy. Take another hit.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't heard that proposal. I mean, my view on that would be, I don't think you can start introducing that sort of thing if you're not equipped in a building to maintain that temperature. And the other thing, of course, is that, what's going to happen with that sort of thing, I guess, is that, if it hits a certain temperature at, a certain time of day, that's, we're all out now, but it might, I can see the appeal to some people, and I can see that if you are sort of working in an environment which is absolutely unbearable, that it would be unfair to maintain, to be required to keep working that. Whether that should lead to legislation to actually limit the temperatures, I think at this stage I would be very, very hesitant in doing that.
And Natalie Bennett, how's this going to get? I mean, this would be another hit to an already sluggish, underperforming economy. How can we pay for that?
Well, Tina said, this is going to be unpleasant. Well, this is actually deadly. People die from heat, and more and more people are going to die from heat.
Yeah, but do you need a law for this, though,
we also have an ageing population. We have more older workers in the workplace. To be safe at work, I've done a lot of work, and I get very angry about people who say, we've got to cut red tape. I've worked with the Hazards at Work campaign, which says better red tape than red bandages. People have to be able to expect to go to work and come home alive. That's a basic, decent standard that we have to meet, and what we've got is workplaces where that's not the case.
I think once you start doing opt-outs for this kind of stuff, it does make it more complex, Natalie. Who is deciding what this temperature is? Because if you work in a kitchen, for example, or a factory, the temperature is naturally going to be a lot hotter than sitting in the LBC studio. I think we're almost cold here this evening because the aircon is so high. I'm not complaining. And it's very clear to our listeners, we are very happy here. But I think there is a point that if you try and set this national level of temperature, it feels like it's difficult. The fact is, employers are going to have to take seriously, as you were saying, Andrew, this is the new norm. And how can you adapt to that? So we obviously have an economy where there's more working from home, for example. Now, for some people, that will be cooler. From other people, it will not be cooler as well. But I think there's a case of saying to people, when it is very hot, and if you can't all get in the office or you've got a long commute, then you do work at home to stay cooler enough. That seems perfectly reasonable. But I'm very against this idea it should be in employment law that if you hit a certain temperature, ding, 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 everyone goes home.
Andrew, what's your view on it?
I think it's completely right, and I've worked on this policy. I used to be a researcher for the Bakers Union, who obviously their workers work in very hot circumstances, baking bread, and in the middle of summer when the outside temperature is 38 degrees, in a bakery, that's going to be even hotter. The point of it is to say there has to be mitigations introduced, and that is actually a growth. That can lead to growth, not hamper growth. Because what you're saying to employers is you've got to invest in a livable workplace. And, bakers is one thing. But if you think about train drivers or bus drivers, do you want the person who's responsible for hundreds or thousands of people passing out because it's 36, 46 degrees in their cab when they're driving a bus or a train? That's incredibly dangerous. So putting these mitigations in is perfectly sensible for that. And it's also about adaptations. It's saying, look, if the temperature hits this, you're allowed to take more regular breaks. You're allowed to, fans have to be brought in. It doesn't necessarily mean everything shuts down and it stops and everyone goes home because the temperature outside is 38 degrees. It means you bring in mitigations in the workplace. And the same for lower temperatures as well. And unions negotiate that, but actually having something in law to back that up just makes it so that irresponsible employers don't try and undercut good employers by getting around these things or not doing it or trying to exploit people in factories and other places. I think that's perfectly sensible.
Speaking of taking regular breaks, I've got to take one. But we're going to continue this conversation through cross-question. More of your questions, of course, to the panel. And then, as I say, after the news at 9, we're going to dig in seriously into this conversation about maximum working temperatures. Your questions to 0345 6060 973. You can text them to 84850. It's cross-question on LBC. And it's 8:20.
This is LBC.
It's not going to make any difference whether we really go ahead with these net zero goals of Ed Miliband if the Chinese are going to continue pumping all the stuff into the atmosphere that they do, and they're not going to go, wow, the British are doing this, we now really need to get our act together. You have, among other things, written the book on some of this stuff. You brought your tome in with you, Green Thinking, by Natalie Bennett. What's your answer to Olad? What difference would it make to tackling climate change if we achieve net zero here, but they don't do anything about it over there?
Well, first of all, you brought up Tony Blair, and people say former Prime Minister Tony Blair. That's the man who, for the last 20 years, has acted as a lobbyist for fossil fuel companies and states, and for the IT sector and AI billionaires, etc. So I don't think we should be bringing Tony Blair into this conversation. He's a man with a particular place, saying the things you expect him to say. But in responding to Olad, first of all, we can't ask other people to do this unless we do it ourselves. Secondly, as you were saying, Sebastian, insulate our homes. That makes our lives much better. Many of the measures that we need to take to cut our carbon emissions also improve our lives. If we reduce air pollution. We've seen in London a significant drop in deaths from air pollution because we've started to tackle the fossil fuels and the impacts in the vehicles. So these are things that are not like, oh, we're doing this and it's a terrible cost. These are things that improve our lives, make us healthier, make us safer. and we can't ask others to do it unless we do it. And also, the reality is that Britain gets more coverage internationally than most other countries. You think about how often Britain is on the news compared to Germany or France or whoever. If we lead, we're showing the way forward for others. And you mentioned, people might talk about aid. It's terrible that we've cut our aid support to the global south, countries that we should be supporting, to help to take the measures that will benefit us all.
But Tina, you clearly take a different view because you want to drill, baby, drill.
Well, I certainly think we should make our contribution to combating climate change. I don't want us to be irresponsible about it or to do anything that sort of deliberately causes damage. But we have to understand that if the reason why we feel so strongly about it is because we want to show others and lead the way, but at whose expense? Who is required to have to pay for some of these different measures that may lead us to reduce our emissions? But when our emissions only add up to 1% of the whole of the global emissions, and the people who are paying for it are the people who have the least amount of money to pay for sort of additions to their electric and gas bills, that's unfair, and that's what people sort of resist. This is about us. If this is about us making ourselves feel good and showing we're leaders in the world, but it's not really having much of an impact on the actual problem itself, that just doesn't seem fair.
Andrew Fisher.
Energy bills, the reason our energy bills are expensive is because they're tied to the market. There is a privatisation premium that we pay in this country because we made the mistake of privatising our energy. If you look at what Norway did, for example, when it discovered North Sea oil and gas at exactly the same time we did, it thought this is a one-off windfall. We're going to invest the revenues from it, not spend it all on corporate tax breaks and tax breaks for the rich, like unfortunately the Thatcher government did and squandered that inheritance. It built a global wealth fund and has invested in a whole range of renewables and a whole other range of infrastructure far better than we have as a country, and it's brought down bills. We have the most expensive energy bills in Europe. That is not because we're doing more on climate change than anyone else. If you look at what Spain's doing in terms of wind, if you look at what France has done, a number of other countries, Germany as well to some extent, and certainly on green homes and infrastructure in that way. But China itself as well. I mean, China is building more solar and more wind than the rest of the world put together. I mean, China obviously is further behind us in terms of development overall, but is now at a point where it's it is producing more from renewables now than it is from fossil fuels for the first time, I think, in the last couple of years, I think now. So it is getting to that point, and it's obviously starting from further back. But it's got there. And that, because of the scale of China, is helping to bring down the cost of solar and helping to bring down the cost of wind energy as well. So I think there's a lot we can do. Energy bills will come down if we have sovereign control of our own energy. If we're reliant on oil markets, whether it's drilled in the North Sea or not, we don't own it. It's privatised. It's not ours. It's not going to bring down bills.
Sebastian.
I think the UK does have a good story to tell on this, that since the 1990s, our carbon emissions have halved. And obviously some of that is linked to deindustrialisation. But, we are responsible for about 1% of the world's carbon emissions in total. So it is still a very small amount. But I think Tina's got a point in saying that you've got to do this in a sustainable way and you've got to take people with you on this journey. And I think there's been a definite political sense that both mainstream parties, Labour and the Conservatives, have gone for this thing without having a clear plan on how to decarbonise the power grid. Decarbonising about 95% of it is quite easy to do. That last 5% is very difficult. And I think that's why the Rishi Sunak government pushed that back. And under Labour, we'll see if there's changes under the incoming Andy Burnham government, but Labour have broadly tried to pull back to more where we were before on this. I think ultimately we've got a good story to tell on renewables. Hornsea, which is off the Lincolnshire coast, I think is the world's largest offshore wind farms, and we were a massive pioneer in building wind turbines in Hull, and they've brought lots of jobs to the east coast of England that's really struggled with that. But I think you've got to do that, but you've also got to build more nuclear at the same time, because you've got to have more baseload capacity, and that is actually the most carbon neutral energy you can do, the most efficient production of energy. So you've got to have renewables and you've got to have nuclear. And yes, of course, we do have to transition away from fossil fuels at some point.
Natalie Bennett, you're shaking your head.
Yes, on nuclear, which is incredibly slow, far too slow for the climate emergency that we can feel all around us today. But I just want to pick up a point to agree with you, Sebastian, because let's be collegiate about this. We have been a real leader, particularly in offshore wind, and we're leading in terms of floating offshore wind. And I must admit, when I first heard of this, I thought it sounded like a gimmick, but actually there's only a limited number of sites where you've got the right depth of ocean, the right conditions that you can put wind turbines in. We're leading in floating offshore wind, and that's something, of course, that we can then sell to the world, our technology, our exports, etc. So this is, if you go for the old dinosaur technology, then you're not actually developing the new technologies in which you can indeed be world leading.
But you're saying it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and.
Exactly. And, I am definitely in favour of us investing in renewables and expanding that industry and doing all that we can to be successful in that way. Absolutely. But what we can't do is ignore the resources that we have available to us. And, it's all very well, we can applaud China for what they have done on renewables. That's great. But they are the largest emitters. They haven't given up on their
nothing like per capita.
And
no.
But the thing
lower
is,
per capita than us. They use less energy per person than we do.
But the amount of carbon they pump into the atmosphere is absolutely extraordinary.
They're a country of 1 billion people that manufactures most of the goods exported around the world.
Where did your washing machine come from? Where did your clothing come from?
I'm fully aware of that.
All of us,
I'm fully aware of that. But at the same time as well, when you look at the need to reduce carbon emissions, China is the one that is the most urgent need for what's actually going to the atmosphere.
Well, the US is, because per capita it's by far the highest polluter. So that's the one that's really got to. I mean, China will start coming down. It is just over that bridge at the moment and is coming down. Trump's policies are sending the US in the wrong direction from an already bad
he's
base.
put it into reverse.
Yeah.
Literally put it into reverse.
He loves coal, beautiful coal, as he describes it.
All right, I'm sure we're going...
union leaders want sort of more for us to continue to exploit our oil and gas, and they're worried that if we don't do that, the cost of jobs and everything else. So I think this is something which we have to understand.
That's an important point.
Yeah,
jobs in the North Sea have been declining for a long time. This is not new. This is because most of the oil and gas fields are declining. And in fact, most of the easiest ones and the best ones are already fully extracted. So the cost of getting oil and gas out of those gas fields in the British part of the North Sea is already going up. So it's not going to bring down bills.
In terms of the workers, what we're talking about is a just transition.
Yeah.
I visited a training facility up in the north, which trained people. We agreed to say they were training them to work on offshore wind turbines. But it was exactly the same skills as working for offshore wind and gas. We need to make sure that we enable workers to transition from one to the other. That's the just transition we've got to have.
OK, I've got to engage in a transition now, inviting everybody out there to join our conversation by calling in with your questions to our panel. The number is 0345 6060973. You can text the questions to 84850. It is 28 minutes to 9 and the news headlines come from Daryl Jackson.
Another record has been set for the hottest June day, with temperatures reaching 36.7 degrees Celsius. The red warning for extreme heat will now run to tomorrow and cover parts of southern and eastern England. A teenage boy has been cleared of the murder and manslaughter of a 9-year-old girl who died from a single stab wound. A jury heard how the 16-year-old had been playing with a knife when it happened at Aria Thorpe's home in Weston-super-Mare last year. And more than 37,000 people have been reported missing following back-to-back earthquakes in Venezuela. At least 188 people are so far known to have died after they hit the capital Caracas yesterday afternoon. LBC weather: heavy thundery rain pushing southeast from Scotland tonight. More storms developing in the southwest. A low of 10 degrees in Scotland, but a tropical night across much of England.
LBC.
go on by telling Donald Trump to keep his nose out of Britain's business. Sebastian Payne.
Well, this is Donald Trump was asked about in the Oval Office when all these journalists come in for their spray, as they called them, and he said that Andy Burnham was extremely liberal, very liberal, and criticised him for what we were talking about earlier with North Sea oil and gas. But then in the kind of typical Trump fashion, he kind of said, we'll wait and see. Dealing with Trump is a complete nightmare for any UK Prime Minister, that when you're luxuriating in opposition or even in Manchester, then it's very easy to comment and critique before you actually get into Downing Street and you deal with the harsh realities of the special relationship. I think when he was Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham was pretty tough about Donald Trump. I think he's tweeted quite a lot about the Trump state visit, about Trump's comments on various ethnic minorities.
January the 6th as well.
January the 6th, exactly, the insurrection on Capitol Hill. Andy Burnham was very critical about that. But as always happens, when you saw David Lammy before he was Foreign Secretary, he said just as many strong things, and the realities of diplomacy kick in. I think for Andy Burnham, the reality is the same that he faces Keir Starmer, which is the UK's security and defence relationship with America is completely interwoven. You can't disaggregate the two. That therefore means having cordial, at the minimal, relations with the US president, and that's what he's going to do. I actually think a lot more in the Burnham government, assuming it happens, will be on the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister, because Keir Starmer was a globetrotter. He very much liked hopping on the Prime Ministerial jet and going to other countries, was preferable for being here, for I think in many cases for him. But I think Andy Burnham is much more going to be a domestic Prime Minister focused on the economy and on social issues. So I think who is the Foreign Secretary in his government will have to take the burden of that relationship with Donald Trump.
Well, we talked about that in the last hour of the programme, and we had an enormous number of listeners texting in suggesting that Keir Starmer should be the Foreign Secretary, which is an interesting situation to contemplate.
I'm not sure it signifies change, though, to have the guy who was in Downing Street crossing the road to King Charles Street and staying in the Foreign Office.
Andrew Fisher, Sebastian talks about the realities of diplomacy and the realities of foreign policy. But the realities of foreign policy, as Albert is suggesting in his question, would allow Andy Burnham to toughen up a bit when it comes to Donald Trump. I mean, the softly approach has got us so far. You don't have to go full Giorgia Maloney, but, I mean, what do you think they should be doing?
I mean, I think the Giorgia Maloney case, just to stick on that for a second, is quite instructive, because there's somebody who is politically absolutely aligned with Donald Trump, exactly on the same part of the right, populist right-wing government, clamping down on immigration, similar rhetoric, actually, a lot of the time. I mean, he has his own idiosyncrasies, but, there are comparabilities. And he just went for her for no reason. And I think that shows you what Donald Trump is. He is a Twitter troll, or whatever. It's got an X troll, I should say now. But that makes it sound like he's not a troll anymore. Yeah, troll. Sorry, yes, he's got his own social media network. I think you've got to be robust about Britain's interests, right? And I think that is the thing that people in Britain want us to stand up for. And if you see this American president kind of railroading over our politics and, talking about who he wants as prime minister and who he thinks is a good guy, stand up to it. Just say who we want as US president. Bite back a bit. I don't think there's a problem with that. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to insult the man, but you can be a lot bolder, I think, on that. But in terms of what Seb was saying about the policy issues, which is ultimately what matters most, I think we do have to start disaggregating ourselves from our special relationship with the US. I think we have to start orientating ourselves closer to Europe. If you look at our nearest allies, our real and more stable allies, I would say they're in Europe rather than the US. If you talk about where we've built alliances with Germany and France and others on Ukraine, that's much more stable than where Donald Trump has been. If you look at the erratic behaviour about bombing Iran, the rest of Europe, even those that are more aligned with Trump, like Maloney, have gone, well, not getting involved in that, that's your mess, you deal with it. And actually, I think what you'll see, I hope, is Britain actually, being more independent and looking at where its interest lies. And I think that is more with Europe and our more, our longer-standing, stable allies in Europe.
And Andrew, can I just ask you, and I'll come to Tina and Natalie for their views on the response to Albert's question, but you mentioned, Donald Trump's activities on social media. To the extent that Andy Burnham has communicated with the British public so far, he's done it through two messages that he's put out on his feed on X. Is it appropriate for the British government, for the Prime Minister and government ministers and members of Parliament to continue using Elon Musk's social media network as their principal channel for communicating with the British public?
No, I don't think it is. Look, there's lots of social media you can communicate through. I left Twitter earlier this year. I haven't posted on it for months. I haven't looked back. It's fine. I'm on Blue Sky. There are other social media available. You can communicate through it. And if the government came off of it, a lot of journalists would come off of it, and actually you'd see it crumble and its stock price fall even further. I understand it's fallen quite a bit today, mercifully. So I think they should do that. I think one government department has withdrawn from it. I think the Attorney General's office, which has probably got about 48 followers, but it would be better if government did that as a whole and said that. Look, I personally think you have got to be quite ethical. I've never appeared on any Rupert Murdoch media or written for any Murdoch papers because I just think he's a poisonous influence on British politics. No disrespect to Seb, sorry, I actually didn't get that.
We'll give you a right to reply.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, but your politics align more with that position, whereas I just think it's wrong. And I think, Elon Musk, where X has gone even further than anything actually Rupert Murdoch's done, I've got a long shopping list of complaints I could level there, is this complete deregulation of space. And it's a failure of us to regulate it, but it's also a complete open politicisation of owning a media channel like that. And I think the British government should say, look, we don't have to be on there. We can go to other places. And I think it should.
Baroness Tina Stoll, let me get back to Albert's question. Should Andy Burnham start as he means to go on by telling Trump to keep his nose out of Britain's business?
Well, I certainly wouldn't advocate him being rude to the American president, but I do think that our Prime Minister, whoever that is, needs to be bold about what about their agenda as Prime Minister for our country, and being able to show that they are representing the interests of the United Kingdom in the way in which they engage with any foreign leader. So I think with somebody like Donald Trump, actually, the more that anybody shows the confidence in their own decisions, their own actions, and is willing to stand up for them in the way that they engage with him, will stand them in good stead. Now, as has already been said, I mean that doesn't prevent Donald Trump suddenly lashing out and being rude as he was to Giorgia Meloni, and I think that her reaction to his rather random attack on her was quite was quite informative, really. I mean, I think you in those sort of circumstances, I think you have to give as good as you get. But what I certainly wouldn't do is adopt his kind of style as an approach in the way in which I engage with him on serious matters. And if I could just say, just going back to the social media problem, I certainly wouldn't advocate as coming off or governments coming off different media platforms as some sort of protest. We can communicate. We need to communicate via whatever channels are available to us to everybody. And I think that we have to bear in mind that whether you like Elon Musk or not, Twitter, as it was under its previous ownership, was also made decisions that were censoring democratically elected politicians. And I think if you're going to start boycotting X, then at least acknowledge that the way it used to operate was actually very detrimental to democracy.
Who was want to pick up on that?
I'm curious, genuinely. Who was censored by Twitter? Which democratically elected politician was censored by Twitter?
Well, I mean, they took off Donald Trump from I think
he left of his own accord, didn't he, and set up his own one?
I think he set up his own one after
he was taken
removed.
Off. And then he was put back on. And then Musk put him back on when Musk
removed him as well.
So, that's for certain behaviour. There's rules of behaviour. If you run an organisation, I mean, we're talking about the Online Safety Act. We're talking about the safety of young people in the UK. We're expecting people to have certain standards of behaviour. And if those standards of behaviour are broken, then people have to be banned from them.
I mean, it was after January the 6th, I think, that he was removed from X and from Facebook.
But
Sorry, Natalie.
Well, I just think that perhaps we should come back to Albert's question. And I think what you said, Simon, should the UK toughen up a bit? I think that's what lots of people feel after the way in which Sir Keir Starmer has behaved towards Donald Trump. The body language. Many people will remember the way in which he handed over, in a sort of bowing and scraping kind of way, the letter inviting the royal visit. And that is it hasn't paid off in terms of the way Trump has related to the UK, but also it does real damage. We had a debate today in the House of Lords about trust in politics, and people see the British Prime Minister behaving like that towards the US, and it doesn't make people feel good about themselves, feel like they've got a leadership in the country that's going to stand up for them. And I've just got to raise, The Guardian's got an extensive report today on a case of a US pilot in Lakenheath, based at Lakenheath, and the way in which we handed over the trial of that case, made the choice to hand it over to the US military. And I'm not going to repeat the details of this because it's absolutely horrifying, but we didn't see justice done, and it was all handed over to US military hands.
All right, more questions to come on Cross Question. You can get in on the act at 0345 6060 973 or text 84850. It's 8:45.
This is LBC.
Children aged 12 to 17 before the ban came into force, and then 3 months after the ban came into force, and found that 80% of them were getting around the social media ban. So, should Andy Burnham drop it? Andrew Fisher.
Yes, I think he should. But
really,
you're surprised I'm saying that. Yeah. I mean, I say it slightly hesitantly because I'm not comfortable with the way social media operates, and I have a 13-year-old son. He's not on any, apart from WhatsApp, which is a messaging service which isn't covered by this proposal, as far as I'm aware. He's not on any social media at this point. But the Australian thing doesn't surprise me, because if you want to know who the most tech-savvy people are, they're generally 12 to 17-year-olds. I am unfortunately nearing that age where I have to get my son or my wife, who's a web developer, to do anything technological around the house, because I am just losing touch with the latest gadgets and the latest apps and stuff, and don't even know the terminology, as you're probably discovering. But what does appall me about social media is not necessarily the age of people on it, but the complete breakdown of any norms. LBC is a broadcaster. It's regulated by Ofcom. If it breaks those rules, it's subject to fines. It could lose its license. These sort of algorithmic social media, whether it's Instagram or X or Blue Sky or anyone else, feeds you stuff in a way that is decided by the operator. It is broadcasting to you. It is not just, you post and you follow certain people and you only get their stuff. That's not how social media works anymore. And that's true of Facebook especially as well now. And so there does need to be regulation of it. And I think that is the issue. The content on it, of kind of stuff that advocates suicide to people, stuff that is advocating self-harm, this stuff should not be on there for anybody of any age. It's incredibly dangerous for people in a whole range of circumstances who are above the age of 16 as well. And you wouldn't put that, even the worst newspapers I could cite that I really don't like wouldn't print that stuff. And I don't think the newspapers are regulated enough. So I think there is something about content that we have to regulate and make them responsible as publishers in a way that would clamp down on it and be much tougher on that. I don't think age limits are the right way forward.
So Sebastian Payne, Andrew Fisher is almost suggesting that this lets the social media companies off the hook.
Yeah, I mean, I actually feel, Andrew, as torn as you about regulating on this as well, because social media has been great for my journalism career. That had I not had Twitter before it was the kind of cesspit that it is now, it was something to promote articles I've written, stories I've written, TV appearances, LBC appearances. So sort of all benefited from that. But there's two things about it. First of all is what it's done to politics. And I think the mentality of social media has been a very corrosive thing for parliamentarians, that a lot of people see social media as a way of of gathering, of grouping. And if you think about the knee dips of Brexit, a lot of that was people thinking about what was happening on Twitter, not what was happening to the country or what was happening in Brussels, for example. So I think it's had that effect. Second of all, the effect on children. I mean, the research is really quite unanimous on terms of the access to the damaging, harmful content that is completely unrestricted. And time and again, our government, other governments have asked the big tech companies to regulate it, and they just don't do it. And they've actually become, as you were alluding to earlier, Tina, they've actually become more libertarian in their approach than they were before by letting anyone get on there and post anything. And I imagine if all of us, if you were on Twitter, looked at your feed, you'll just get an absolute diatribe of absolute rubbish, most of it from bots. I think when it comes to the ban the government has brought forward, I think you've got to try and do something. It's probably not going to work. Yes, people are going to get around it, but there's a reason that there are age limits on buying cigarettes, for example, that you say okay, a 10-year-old might be able to get some. That doesn't mean you don't stop shops from buying them. And I think it's the same thing with social media. And I imagine in 10, 20 years' time, we will look back on this moment and say, why didn't we act faster and why didn't we act more harshly? Because of the damage it is doing to a generation of children. It has already happened, in fact. So I wish the government well, but I think it is going to be difficult. And it is going to be, just in Australia, a whack-a-mole.
Well, we've got an Australian in the house. And, I mean, this announcement...
I haven't lived there for 30-something years.
Still counts. It still counts. This announcement by the government, by the Prime Minister, was hugely popular with parents. It felt for many parents as though a pressure gauge had been lifted, even if the ban is not going to be everything that they think it might be. But do you think that Andy Burnham should drop it?
Well, I think, first of all, that point about parents being so relieved, I'm afraid we were talking about trust in politics. Parents are told, right, the government's going to fix it. Yet we already know, we have the evidence from Australia that this is highly unlikely to work. Let's make sure that government announcements are based on evidence, are based on fact, not just offering a magic wand that's going to solve this problem when it's very clear it's not going to solve this problem. I'm very much with Andrew on this, that it has to be safe for everybody. People are providing a product, providing a service, making a large amount of money out of it. It has to be safe for everybody. And, you don't suddenly on your 16th birthday, one day older than you were the day before, be capable of coping with the toxic soup that is our social media. And kids, young people will get round it. And also the other thing we shouldn't forget is you think about kids with disabilities, you think about young people who are really vulnerable and perhaps stuck in their homes. One of the things that has come out of Australia is real concern about people like that suddenly losing their entire social network. There's lots of terrible things there, but there's also lots of places where young people get their support networks, get help, get information, and just cutting that off is really dangerous.
OK, Tina Stoll, we've got other questions to get to, but a U-turn on social media ban by Andy Burnham, U-turning on his predecessor's policy?
No, I mean, I'm instinctively never in favour of bans, and it wasn't something that I was supportive of in the past. However, I think because of the damage that we know, the evidence of the damage that social media is doing to our young people is so strong that we can't ignore it. And my fear is that if we have the Online Safety Act as it is, if we seek to keep adding complexity to the regulation in sort of that already exists, what happens is we're forced into a situation where there is the sort of our desire to protect our children ends up limiting the free speech of our adults. And for me, what this ban does, it provides a firebreak, and it forces the tech companies to address the dangers that they are responsible for, because they don't like it. I mean, whether there's children getting around this ban or not, I know because I've talked to these tech companies, they really, really don't like this at all. And what I've said to them is they have to accept that they have failed in giving parents confidence that they are operating their systems in a way which is safe for children. Until they acknowledge that and change them to people's satisfaction, then this has got to remain. But I think this is a way of forcing actually the tech companies to change their ways, up their game. And once they've done that, we can look at it again.
OK, we're going to move on to the next question. The clock is slightly against us, but it comes on the phone from Robin in Whitehaven. Robin, good evening to you. What's your question for the panel?
Good evening. I'd like to ask, following Kemi Badenoch's comments made about Bridget Phillipson, is her behaviour starting to look like that of a Temu Trump?
A kind of a pound shop Trump or a dollar store Trump. Tina Stoll, let's stay with you.
No. I mean, thank you very much for the question. But I think that what Kemi has criticised the government and government ministers for doing, and Bridget Phillipson in particular, is absolutely justified. Bridget Phillipson's decision to add VAT to private schools in order to raise what she said was she was doing it in order to increase the number of teachers. She has not done that. In fact, the number of teachers in state schools has gone down. And the only reason that she was targeting these private schools was in order to somehow damage the benefits that those schools provide to the families who take advantage of them. Now, I didn't go to a private school. I'm not somebody who has got sort of, any kind of personal attachment to private schools. But I think that the decision and the motives behind it were the wrong ones. And I think that, just to illustrate further what I think is wrong in this. I mean, Eton had plans in place in Middlesbrough to open up a new school. They were working with the local politicians in Middlesbrough. When Bridget Phillipson was appointed Education Secretary, one of the first things she did was to stop that new opportunity being created for for disadvantaged children in that part of the world. So I'm afraid I think Kemi was perfectly justified in what she said.
Natalie Bennett.
Well, I think coming back to Robin's question, I don't think we need international comparisons here. The reality is, I would say again, we have such a huge problem with trust in politics. And this kind of tone, this sort of approach, this kind of point scoring, it's the classic thing. Lots of people say to me, I go into schools, colleges and universities, and people say, wouldn't go into politics. I've seen Prime Minister's questions. This is not a constructive way to run the country, to have political debate. And it's doing real damage. And the people who are doing this have to be held responsible for it.
Sebastian Payne?
Oh, I think parliamentary knockabout is something that it's quite easy to get a little bit, if you don't mind me saying, Natalie, censorious about. That if you think back to Gladstone and Disraeli, the language they used about each other was so many times worse than what you heard between Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer with reference to Bridget Phillipson at PMQs this week. And lest to be forgotten that Bridget Phillipson had said previously that Nick Timothy, who's the Shadow Justice Secretary, was either said racist comments before. So I think, it's pretty tough stuff there. And obviously, Kemi Badenoch feels very passionately about the school's issue there. And I think what was striking for me over that exchange was not maybe the tenor of it, but was the fact that the government seemed to struggle to defend what Miss Phillipson had done. That, she said that she was going to boost teachers. She hasn't done that. She's done the private school thing, which I think was a Labour manifesto commitment. So that's what you kind of expect to do that. But I think I'd rather people robustly debated the substance and just didn't get caught up in, was it nasty words or not.
And Andrew Fisher.
Well, I think it's interesting that both Seb and Tina have both declined to use the language that Kemi Badenoch used. You said it's fine for her to use it, but you didn't use it yourselves, and I think that's quite instructive, is that you don't think she's a spiteful class warrior. That's not what you use. And actually, the worst thing she said was in an interview beforehand where she just compared her to a Gestapo officer, which I think is far more offensive and an absolutely ridiculous comparison. And actually, I think when you start, there's Godwin's law, isn't there? If the minute you invoke Nazis as a comparison, you've lost the argument. I just think it's ridiculous. And it does Kemi Badenoch damage. So, I mean, it doesn't bother me in that sense. I think she undermines herself with that sort of comment. I think it's very, very... You can disagree on the private school thing. I personally agree with it. And actually, if you look at what's happened as a result of that, more funding has gone into state schools. That's a good thing. It's for everybody's kids. And there shouldn't have been tax breaks on private schools in the first place on the substance of it. But we can have that debate. And without calling each other Nazis or spiteful class warriors, I think it's a perfectly moderate tax adjustment in our system to put money into schools that represent 93% of children in this country, rather than subsidising the education of 7%. So I think the policy's fine, and I think what Kemi Badenoch said, especially in the interview, not at PMQ so much, but especially in that interview she gave beforehand, where she called her a Gestapo officer for doing it.
Okay,
but I think it's completely wrong. And please, you wouldn't defend that, would you? You don't think Bridget Phillipson is like a Gestapo officer?
The important thing is when decisions are made which are targeted at specific groups of society, and those that are considered to be sort of more advantaged, that there's some kind of benefit that is created by doing, whether it's removing hereditary peers from the House of Lords or what it's been done with private schools. It's not added anything.
It has. There's more funding going into state schools. There's more funding in state schools.
Fewer teachers.
Well, there's fewer pupils because the birth rate's gone down there. So, I mean, you would expect teacher ratios to decline.
She was going to increase,
and I agree.
And
teacher recruitment has been poor for
Okay,
years.
We need more teachers.
We do need more teachers. I agree.
This is a conversation that we will continue on LBC. Unfortunately, I've got to bring it to a close, but we do have time briefly for our fun question of the night, where a listener is perhaps asking for assistance from all of us. Janice in Plymouth asks, what's your best tip for trying to sleep when it's this hot at night? Sebastian Payne.
I barely slept last night, so I feel like I'm the wrong person to do this. But I think we had the blinds closed for most of the day, so you keep the heat out of your room, and then only open them up at night, if at all possible, and buy a £9 sleeping mask from Amazon, so you can have your windows open and get awakened by the sunlight.
Natalie Bennett. Is it in your book?
No, it's not in my book. There's lots of green ideas
edition.
in here, but I'll have to add it. But, anyone who's been sitting at home wondering, my accent does come from Australia originally, and my first degree was agricultural science. So I actually worked on Australian farms in North Queensland, around Longreach. 47, 48 degrees, going to sleep under a tin roof, and it hardly cools down at all at night. Evaporative cooling is your friend. Basically, I used to tip a bucket of water over myself in the bed with the fan on, and try and go to sleep before it all evaporated.
Wow. Tina Stoll.
I'm afraid I've got nothing that dramatic to offer. All I would do is put a top sheet on and try and stay cool.
All right. And Andrew Fisher.
Exactly the same as Seb, except I'd add, and when the sun has gone down, open the windows up as wide as possible, well before you go to sleep, ideally. Don't drink alcohol either. That does affect your sleep. And that sounds really abstemious and miserable, I know, but actually just temporarily while it's this hot,
just
off the alcohol.
The temptation for crisp beer is so
high. It is significant.
It doesn't help you sleep.
I know, I agree with you.
My thanks to all of you. You've been great sports. Baroness Tina Stoll, Conservative Party peer. Baroness Natalie Bennett, Green Party peer. Andrew Fisher, columnist for the iPaper. And Sebastian Payne, leader, writer and columnist at The Times. Ian Dale returns on Monday. So does Cross Question at 8 o'clock, and his panel that evening will include Reform UK's head of local government delivery and former Conservative MP Ben Bradley, plus the Politics Home reporter Tom Scottson, and two mystery guests who don't even yet know that they're going to be here on Monday at 8 o'clock. I'm going to be with you for another hour. We are going to talk further about climate change and this idea of instituting maximum temperatures at which people should then be given the opportunity to stop working. But right now here on LBC, it's coming up to 5 minutes past 9.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, the UK has seen yet another record-breaking day in June, with temperatures reaching 36.7 degrees Celsius in Somerset. A red warning for extreme heat will run until tomorrow now for parts of southern and eastern England. London Ambulance Service received its highest ever number of life-threatening emergencies yesterday. Meanwhile, London Mayor Sir Sadiq Khan's told LBC what lessons have been learned for the fire service since the wildfires in 2022.
Since then, from City Hall, we've invested huge amounts in making sure our firefighters have the right kit. Imagine the temperatures there are if you're wearing heavy clothes. The hose pipes have changed to make sure they're holy hose pipes. We've made sure the police have kit so vehicles can get to areas which fire engines can't get to. We've trained our firefighters. We've got drones now and so forth.
A teenager's been found not guilty of the murder and manslaughter of a 9-year-old girl. Aria Thorpe died from a single stab wound at her home in Weston-super-Mare last December. The 16-year-old boy says he stabbed her accidentally. At least 188 people have been killed in Venezuela after back-to-back earthquakes in the country overnight. Tens of thousands are reported missing. Rescuers are trying to free those trapped under rubble. Christine Goulet's the director at the Earthquake Science Center in California.
Unfortunately, in Venezuela, they use a lot of poorly reinforced concrete structures. And so we know that these are very fragile. And so given a level of shaking, you would expect this number of collapse or damage. And it gives a sense for emergency responders of the magnitude of what they're dealing with.
A woman's died and a girl's critically injured after a train hit their car on a level crossing. The crash happened at Horton in Lancashire this morning. Rachel Reeves has confirmed she's backing Andy Burnham to become the next leader of the Labour Party. The Chancellor says she's confident the new MP for Makerfield will stick to her fiscal rules if he gets into number 10. She's also been asked about whether she'd accept a role in his cabinet.
Those are choices that the new Prime Minister, I hope Andy Burnham, will get to make in a few weeks' time. I'm not going to preempt those. It is his prerogative as Prime Minister to make those appointments. But I'm really proud of my record as Chancellor.
In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 68 points at 10,529. The pound buys $1.32 and €1.16. LBC weather, heavy thundery rain pushing southeastwards from Scotland tonight. More storms developing in the southwest. A low of 10 degrees in Scotland, but a tropical night across much of England. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
In for Ian Dale for one final hour this week, as Daryl was just saying, a tropical night across the UK with again the possibility of some of those tropical storms like we saw a couple of nights ago. Ian's back in this chair on Monday. By then he will be tanned, rested and ready for the thrills and spills that are to come. This hour, we're going to talk about the heatwave in a couple of different ways. At 9:30, we're going to hear about what I think is a little-known fact. It certainly wasn't known by me. That by the year 2055, which is not that far off, the UK will not have enough water to sustain our population. Extraordinary numbers that show in just 30 years, the country will be 5 billion litres short of water every single day. 5 billion litres a day. What are we going to do about that? We'll talk about it at 9:30. But first, what are we going to do about the conditions in which you may well have found yourself working yesterday, today, and tomorrow? Soaring temperatures, record highs that have ignited a question about whether it is time for you to be able to call time on working when the mercury soars. Hannah Spencer, the recently elected Green Party MP for Gorton and Denton, with this proposal on social media today.
Whatever job you are doing, you are vital to keeping this country going. We all have a right to be safe at work, which is why us Greens are calling for legal limits on workplace temperatures. But the government is not listening, and this is where you can take action. If you go and search online for your MP, find their contact details and ask them to please support the Green Party's call for temperature limits in workplace so that we can all be safe out there.
Now, it is not entirely clear that the government is not listening. I mean, to be fair, they're in the middle of a major bit of upheaval here in London, but only yesterday Sir Sadiq Khan was telling us here on LBC that he thinks there should be maximum and minimum temperatures beyond which schools, for example, should not be allowed to stay open. We heard last night on the programme that the French are debating possibly the most French thing you've ever heard, giving everyone up to 6 days of paid climate leave a year year to be used on days when people think it's just too hot to show up. Spain already has maximum temperature laws. In Spain, for sedentary work indoors, like I'm doing right now, the legal maximum temperature is 27 degrees. And for light physical work, it's 25 degrees. And when the country's equivalent of the Met Office issues red or orange extreme heat warnings, working outdoors is legally banned. Do you want to see something similar here? How are we going to pay for it? Would it not mean the economy, already sluggish, taking another hit at the worst possible moment? And how exactly would it work? Because obviously the emergency services, for example, would have to be exempt, along with, I presume, the NHS. Tell me what it was like out there or even indoors for you today, and whether you back the idea of maximum temperature laws that can govern what happens in the workplace. Because there's one thing for certain, our climate has changed and we are only going to see more of this. So is this idea of legislating maximum temperatures in the workplace a good idea that you would like to see the government take up? Call me now at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. It's the same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones as well. Joining me now to kick our conversation off is Mariam Eslamdoust, who is the General Secretary of the Transport Salaried Staffs Association. Mariam Eslamdoust, I'm very grateful to you for joining us on the programme this evening. Can you just start by introducing your union? Which workers do you represent, and what kind of experiences have they been having over the last 48 to 72 hours? Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks so much for having me on. My union, TSSA Union, represents thousands of people working across rail and transport network. We've been campaigning on this issue and working in extreme heat for years.
And so the experiences of your members over the last 2 or 3 days must have been pretty intense.
It definitely has been, and I think it's well documented on the news. But look, previously our campaign on working in extreme heat was seen as a bit of a niche campaign because we simply didn't get these kinds of temperatures very often, but that's really changing. Heat waves are becoming more common, and we're finding that the law just hasn't kept up.
So what's your view on this idea? And I know the Greens are promoting it, but Sir Sadiq Khan was talking about it yesterday as well, of putting into place maximum temperatures and maybe even minimum temperatures for dealing with the cold in the winter. Is this something that you would like to see taken up? And what are the economic consequences of this going to be? Because it's going to cost money.
So absolutely, we agree with it. Our view is that there should be a maximum indoor working temperature of around 24 degrees and a maximum outdoor temperature of 30 degrees. Beyond that, unless proper cooling measures are in place, it's simply not safe to working. And the risks are real. It's not just about being uncomfortable. Working in extreme heat can lead to dehydration, nausea, heat exhaustion, and in really worst cases, heat stroke. So it affects concentration and judgment. And if you're doing a safety critical job on the railway, it's not just a risk to the person, it's a risk to passengers as well. So employers just can't be complacent. The investment needs to happen, and it needs to happen now.
But a maximum temperature of 30 degrees, that would be for outdoor work, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, we hit 36.7 today. I mean, there will have been, I don't have the numbers of how many days so far this year have been over 30 degrees, but that's going to be a substantial number of days given the trajectory that we are on. How is the economy, never mind going to grow, how is the economy going to continue performing if every time the mercury goes above 30 degrees, it's time for everybody to clock off?
Look, Britain previously didn't get this kind of weather, and we didn't have a plan for it. Britain's transport network just isn't going to work unless concessions are made and the transport network is made safe for these kind of weather conditions. You would have heard by now, too many trains and buses have had to halt because they have poor ventilation. There's very little air conditioning on our transport system, and in some services you can't even open a window. We've all been stuck on a packed train or a bus in the middle of a heat wave. It can become unbearable very quickly.
So why not take the money that would be spent on implementing these maximum temperature law ideas? Why not take that money and instead get some air conditioning going on the trains and the buses and the other various modes of transport that we're all using and sweltering on?
Well, ventilation and air conditioning and investment in that is part of the solution, but it isn't a silver bullet. We need sensible legal limits on working in extreme heat. And employers who take their responsibility seriously, they are actually investing in transport and the future of transport, and that means more returns to them. We need a transport system that's fit for a warming climate. And you know what? If we protect our workers and if the investments are made, we're also protecting the public.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you about the need for more resilience in the transport network. I don't think anybody listening to this programme would disagree with that. But if I'm an NHS worker and I've got to get to work because I'm not going to be allowed to take time off under these maximum temperature rules, or if I'm a member of the emergency services and I've got to get to work, my capacity to do that is going to be substantially diminished if every time the mercury hits 30 degrees, the men and women doing a terrific job maintaining our public transportation networks are going to be told, OK, you can go home.
Look, other countries have adapted because they've recognised that hot weather is here to stay. We also need to start making those investments because these heat waves aren't a one-off anymore.
I'm grateful to you for your time, Mariam. Thanks so much for coming on the programme. Mariam Eslamdoust is the General Secretary of the Transport and Salaried Staffs Association. Just going back to the law in Spain, for Spanish workers, the legal maximum temperature is 27 degrees for sedentary work indoors, and for light physical work, it's 25 degrees. They don't have a legally mandated maximum temperature, but the way they do it is to say that when the Met Office issues red or orange extreme heat warnings, then working outdoors is legally banned, which seems to me like it might be a slightly better way to go, because if you draw the line at 30 degrees, as Mariam Eslamdoust was suggesting there, we're going to be over 30 degrees a lot. Pretty much every summer. Call me and let me know what you think of this idea. 0345 6060 973. Same number for WhatsApp that it is on the phones. You can text us at 84850. Keith has texted in to say, the indoors temperature in my cab as a bus driver was 39 degrees. How will this work if industry stands against it? Call me and let me know what you think. It's LBC. The time is 18 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
Of someone other than the poor. Other countries survive the heat with AC just fine. We've got a certain amount of money in the public purse, not much, let's be honest right now. And we've got to make some big decisions here about how to spend it to maximum effect. Whether that includes this kind of maximum temperature law that the Greens and Sir Sadiq Khan have been contemplating, I think is open to question. Let's find out what Martin thinks. He is in Aylesbury in Buckinghamshire. Good evening, Martin. How has your day been?
Hot. So I'm a chef. I've just done a 10-hour shift. I've just finished. I'm on my way home. I didn't even check what my temperature was in my kitchen today. There's absolutely no way that they could legislate for it. I had 2 ovens on today, a fryer, 2 hot cupboards. It's a narrow galley kitchen, and even in the middle of winter, on a busy evening at Christmas, it's probably getting up to 30 degrees in there, 35 degrees. So it's a very awkward situation, really. The amount of business I'd have lost tonight if I'd have had to close down because it was too hot. It just wouldn't work. The legislation that you'd have to put in place would be so complicated. I know my wife was a unison shop steward when she worked for the local council, and I know that there was minimum temperatures that they would adhere to, but there wasn't a maximum temperature. And it was just sort of common sense, if it was that hot, they would. But I mean, they were lucky they had air conditioned offices. But from a catering point of view, it just would be almost impossible to regulate it, because you work in a busy kitchen. I've cooked for 50 people tonight. And that has to be hot. You can't send it out cold.
I mean, you'd be knocking off every day if the temperature level was set at 30 degrees, or as they've done in Spain, I've lost that number now, between 26 and 28 degrees. You'd never do a day's work in a kitchen.
I mean, I can't imagine what it's like in a kitchen out in Spain. I mean, I'm an Egyptophile. I love Egypt. I go diving, and so I go out there quite a bit. And I mean, I've seen some of their kitchens out there, and I mean, they are quite sophisticated. But there's no way that they're air conditioned down to 30 degrees. But like I say, I don't think I've ever worked in a kitchen where you could get that kind of temperature if you needed it. Maybe in some of the bigger offices that you'd work in, where you're doing industrial style catering. I work in a small Masonic hall. We wouldn't be able to afford to outfit our kitchen with air conditioning to keep the kitchen cool in that respect. I come from another point of view as well. I was brought up on a dairy farm, and I can tell you at 5 o'clock in the morning, again, it's if it's -5, it's -5. You can't have that dairy warm. You can't warm it up. You can't heat it. They're cows. They're used to that temperature. Although they're indoors in the winter, it's still cold. It's not. It's not a place that you could keep warm. You milk the cows and you chill the milk down very quickly. There's procedures for that, but you couldn't. You couldn't heat that up or cool it down to the extent that you'd be able to regulate it. And you can't not milk cows.
And just going back to your kitchen, Martin, so how do you get through a day like today?
45 years of experience. You just live with it.
And no alternative, right? I mean, no option.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I mean, what you look forward to is going home in the evening, driving home, putting the aircon on for 5 minutes, on your way home and chilling out. But yeah, it's just something that I've worked with all my life. I mean, especially when I started back in the 80s. People saying it wasn't as warm back then. But even then, the first place I worked in, I mean, there was no air conditioning at all in any part of the building. And like when you finished work, I lived upstairs. And you can imagine what that's like, in the middle of an old thatched cottage, basically in the middle of Bedfordshire. It's like, it's like a furnace, basically. But like I say, to actually legislate for something like that outside, I can understand working outside, above 36 degrees or whatever. I can get that you've got to have a certain, rules and stuff, maybe. But I cannot see, and also minimum temperatures. If you're working in a food factory, they'll be chilled down to about 5 degrees. Because you're working with food products, and food products have to be in a fridge below 5 degrees. So you'd have to legislate for that, which would, I just think it would be too complicated. I can't see how it would work.
I think that's all fascinating, Martin. Thanks very much indeed for sharing your experience. I hope it was a successful day in the kitchen. I know it was a very hot one, and it will be tomorrow. As Martin was speaking there, I was thinking about my own life as a reporter. I mean, I'm unbelievably lucky and privileged. I get to travel all over the world and report the news, and I have done for over 40 years at this point. I mean, I spent weeks standing on an unbelievably hot roof in Baghdad, reporting, outside as the mercury soared, up to where it was here in the UK today and beyond. I've had experiences. I used to live in Moscow. We used to go out and report live from Red Square in the height of winter. There was no option for us to say, well, I'm afraid that's above the maximum temperature or above the minimum temperature. But there are people that think and believe that in order to address this, these maximum and minimum temperature targets are something that we should be considering. Let's go to Uxbridge. Nicholas is there. Nicholas, what's your view this evening? Good evening.
Hi, how are you doing?
All right, thanks. How are you?
I just want to put the point across. I'm a HGV driver, and unfortunately I got stuck in that horrible accident on the M25 yesterday.
Oh, I'm sorry. That must have been awful.
Yeah, I pulled into Clacker Lane Services at about 12 o'clock yesterday. Obviously, I can't keep the engine running, can't keep the aircon going, all of that. I was there till 5 o'clock this morning. The temperature in that truck stop, in the services, got up to 42 degrees. But
in the motorway services?
Yeah, but we just have to deal with it. No one thinks about the truck drivers being stuck. Obviously, like I said, we can't have the engines running all night because it costs diesel, stuff like that. So we have to deal with it. But you're talking about minimum temperatures of working 24 degrees or anything like that you can't work. We have no choice.
So if there was a choice, though, Nicholas, between a law that allowed you to knock off after the temperature reached, 34, 35 degrees in your cab, or money that was being used by the government, because you can only spend every pound once, to get air conditioning into that motorway services, which would you prefer?
I mean, it's not going to work. You're not going to get air conditioning into the trucks, are you, in the car parks? That's not going to work. And obviously, saying to truck drivers, okay, you can knock off once it gets to 30 degrees, that affects everybody because deliveries are not going to get made, supermarkets are not going to get their food, things like that. So it's a knock-on chain. So we've just got to deal with it and get on with it. If you understand what I mean.
So if I do understand what you mean. So if you were advising the Prime Minister, whoever that is, at the particular moment when you were advising them, what would you tell them to do in terms of trying to make the country more ready to deal with these soaring temperatures? Because something's got to be done somewhere.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I was born in New Zealand. I mean, like, when I was at school in New Zealand, if it got over 30 degrees or whatever, we didn't shut schools. We just got on with it. And they still do now. I mean, I'll go home every couple of years, and regularly the temperature gets above 30 degrees to 35, things like that in the summer. Everybody else just gets on with it, but for some reason in this country, it all stops.
So you think we need a dose of resilience, Nicholas. Thanks very much indeed for calling in. Nicholas, a truck driver who got stuck in that accident on the M25 yesterday. The temperature in his cab reached 42 2 degrees. Lawrence has texted in and says, Simon, can anyone tell when people go to hot countries for their holidays, do they moan over there while they're on holiday in those hot countries? Some of you, by the way, have been texting in pursuant to our fun question at the end of Cross Question with how you cope overnight. What are your tips for sleeping at night in this hot weather? Several of you have texted in to suggest that people freeze their hot water bottles. Emma in Bideford has said, tell listeners to freeze a hot water bottle with cold water in it, but do not fill it totally. Wrap the hot water bottle in a tea towel once it's frozen. Do not put the frozen hot water bottle on bare skin, because otherwise it can cause a burn. So you freeze a hot water bottle that is not filled completely with water, then wrap it in a towel and then use it as a cold water bottle. That from Emma in Bideford, but we've had several other listeners texting with very, very similar recommendations. More of your calls on this idea about maximum temperatures at which people should be allowed to clock off. Tell me if you think that's a good idea for the country to embrace. And in a moment, we are also going to take a look at the 30-year window that we've got left before this country finds itself running out of enough water to sustain itself. That story is coming up. But now with the time at 28 minutes to 10, the news headlines come from Daryl Jackson.
London Ambulance Service says it recorded the highest number of life-threatening emergencies in its history yesterday. Another record has been broken for the hottest June day today, with temperatures reaching 36.7 degrees Celsius in Somerset. A jury's found a teenage boy not guilty of the murder and manslaughter of a 9-year-old girl in Weston-super-Mare. Aria Thorpe died from a single stab wound at her home in December last year. And at least 188 people have been killed in Venezuela after back-to-back earthquakes hit the country overnight. Tens of thousands are reported missing. LBC weather: heavy, thundery rain pushing south-eastwards from Scotland tonight. More storms developing in the southwest. A low of 10 degrees in Scotland, but a tropical night across much of England.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM.
Hot water bottle filled with cold water, but not all the way up to the top, I'm assuming, in the fridge instead until it gets very cold. Either way, you're going to end up with a cold water bottle, but the way that Sarah in Penge is suggesting, it might not burst subsequently when you put hot water into it. We're going to continue taking your calls about whether the country ought to embrace this idea of a law that absolutely legislates maximum temperatures at which people should be allowed to work inside or outside as these soaring temperatures impact our country. Back to your calls and texts on that in a moment, but we're going to talk more now about water. Because as I was reading the papers over the weekend, I have to say I almost fell out of my seat when I read in an article a passing reference to the fact that in 30 years' time, by the year 2055, we are going to be experiencing major water shortages here in the UK. By then, even in one of Europe's wettest countries, we're facing a projected shortfall of 5 billion litres of water a day. 5 billion litres every single day. We've already seen other parts of the world, places like Cape Town and Sao Paulo, making preparations for the so-called day zero when the taps run dry. A few years ago, you may remember that there was no water available in Cape Town for a while. I did not know until the weekend that Tehran in Iran is also one of those cities worldwide, already facing significant water challenges. But the idea that we are only 3 decades away in Britain from not having enough for our own daily activities seems like a big deal. So we thought we'd explore it. And to do that, I'm very happy to say that I'm joined this evening by Dr. Heather Smith, a senior lecturer in water governance at Cranfield University. Dr. Smith, thanks so much for coming on LBC tonight to talk about this. I mean, I'm not wrong. This is a big deal, right? Good evening to you.
Yes, good evening. And no, you're not wrong. It's a very big deal, and it's unfortunately something that hasn't got the level of attention that it probably should get. It's caused by a wide range of reasons, climate change being among them. We're experiencing a drier climate overall, so supplies of water in the environment are going down, and it's probably not difficult to imagine that in the current heat wave. We're experiencing more dry periods like this. And so, there's just less water available in the environment. And then on top of that, demands are going up. So more household demand, more business demand, more demands from new things like data centers to support AI. So that makes for a very challenging mix.
So what should the country be thinking about doing? I mean, do desalination plants play a role in this? Conservation? What's the strategy? Because, I mean, the clock's ticking. 30 years feels to many people like it's a long way away. When you get to my age, 30 years seems like a snap of the fingers. I mean, what should we be doing?
Well, you're right. 30 years is not that far away. And the answer is essentially all of the above. This is very much a everything at the wall scenario. The country, the water companies are investing in a lot of new resources. So desalination is one of the options. And there's several desal plants that are being planned. Water recycling is another option. So again, the water companies are investing in several water recycling schemes. New reservoirs are being built and planned. And then on top of that, yes, we have to implement bigger conservation measures.
What is water recycling? I always assumed that all water was automatically recycled.
Well, that's essentially true. Yeah, and there's a finite amount of water in the world, and it continually cycles. This is a planned version where we take the what comes out of sewage treatment works, which is the highly treated effluent, and it goes into is purified to a very high standard, so it gets extensive amounts of treatment, and then goes back into, say, a river or a reservoir, where it is then re-abstracted to support drinking water sources.
And are we benefited? I mean, I was saying we're one of Europe's wettest countries, so I suppose that gives us some degree of resilience here. But are we benefited by the fact that we are obviously an island nation, absolutely surrounded by seawater, by salt water? Presumably, as we head towards 2055, and long before then, we really have to be investing significantly in those desalination plants.
Yes, and the thing is, we're not as rainy as people often think. The south of England in particular is much drier than people realize, and has average rainfalls on average with some much drier countries. But yes, we do have the benefit of having an extensive coastline, and desalination will definitely be part of our water future. The trade-off we have there, which we have to manage, is the fact that it takes a lot more energy and can be quite expensive. So we have to very closely manage the impact that might have on water bills.
We live in an era, as you will be aware, Dr. Smith, of governments that come and go and prime ministers that come and go on a continuing basis over the course of the last decade. This issue is going to require serious, consistent government attention. Is our political system, do you think, capable of providing the focus necessary so that in 2055 we don't all wake up and say, where's all the water gone?
Well, we hope so. There has been a bit of political wind of late with the fact that water has received quite a bit of attention. So we had the Independent Water Commission last year, the Cunliffe report. There was a lot of political attention on the back of that. So I think the government does realise the importance of this. There's an understanding that water has to support economic growth, that it's fundamental to economic growth. So this has certainly gotten the attention of the Treasury. So I hope that there's enough attention there that it can receive some consistent attention, but that it will remain to be seen.
And can I just put to you what one of our listeners, Chris, has just texted in? And I suspect he's saying this with a tone of sarcasm in his voice. He says, gee, it's a good thing that our private water companies have invested so heavily in our infrastructure over the past 30 years. He's got a point, hasn't he?
Well, there has been a gap, I suppose, in investing in certain infrastructure. There's a saying that the best time to have built a reservoir was 20 years ago. So yes, these are long-term plans that need a lot of leeway and a lot of lead time in being invested in. But part of the reason for that is not just to do with the water companies, is the fact that the regulatory environment was very concerned with keeping bills low. So that in itself kept a lid on some of the investment that was allowed.
Dr. Heather Smith, thank you so much for being on the programme tonight and shedding light on this, which I think is something that most people have absolutely no idea is a threat to the country, that in 30 years' time, this country, on its current trajectory, will be 5 billion litres of water short of its needs every single day. Dr. Heather Smith, Senior Lecturer in Water Governance at Cranfield University. Let's go back to your calls about this whole maximum temperature legislation idea. Nathan is in Perth, up in Scotland. Good evening, Nathan.
Good evening, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, very good. So, when I was listening, I used to work in a factory, and it was a glass factory, and it would exceed those kind of temperatures pretty much every minute of the day when you were in it. I used to do 12-hour shifts there. So I just don't see how this kind of thing would work. So if that was the law now, when would those factories ever be able to continue working?
Was it the kind of factory, Nathan, where air conditioning could theoretically be operational? Depends on what you were producing, I guess.
No, because if you were at the hot end where I used to work, producing glass, air conditioning isn't going to cool it. You're in the heat 12 hours a day, full PPE. That was just part of the job.
And so what's your view about can anything be done in a workplace like that? Or as a society, do we just have to be resilient?
I do think that there's, to both of those points, I mean, when you're working in a job like that, you understand that is part of it. And there is also, you can't expect people in offices to just work and swelter in heat, but to just simply say that when a temperature is reached, everybody just clocks off.
Yeah.
I can't see how that works. Now, I am now self-employed. I can't expect customers to pay me just because it's hot.
Right.
I still need to go and work. There's still things to be done. You can't just stop.
Yeah, and
it's almost like what happens at winter when it gets too cold. It's the same sort of thing. The country just seems to want to just stop doing things. And I just don't see how it works.
Yeah, and then there's also a real question, isn't there, about which people in which jobs would be allowed to knock off, because clearly emergency workers won't be able to, the police, the fire brigade, NHS workers, and you do have the risk, including, of course, the self-employed who will lose money if they simply clock off. You do have the risk of that whole idea creating more division in society. Nathan, I'm very grateful to you for calling in. Thanks very much. I hope you are relatively cool up in Perth. I think you probably should be, but we'll check that and see what the temperature is in Perth in Scotland tonight. More of your calls to come, plus your texts. 0345 6060 973 84850 for the texts. It's 14 minutes to 10.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Henry Riley.
The government's open to the idea of changing school hours during the heatwave. If it stops the classrooms closing, then is it something we should consider? But first, we'll talk tax and the monarchy.
Henry Riley at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
I certainly am and will be since my dying day. Right.
And tell us, what have the temperatures been like in Tenerife this week?
Well, a lot cooler than England.
Really?
28 today. We've had a very slow start to the summer this year. 28 today. It's gone over 30 a couple of times. But anyway, the thing I'm calling about, I'm hearing this thing about restaurants having a 27-degree maximum kitchen temperature. And I just don't believe it. When we came here, we bought a restaurant and had a small kitchen with no air conditioning, very little ventilation. And my wife used to cook, a very, very, very quality cook, and I used to wash up. And the average temperature in the winter would have been somewhere between 30 and 35. And in the summer is between 45, maybe even up to 50. And I doubt if there's any restaurants at all in Spain or the Canary Islands that would have kitchens cooler than 27 degrees.
Yeah, it wasn't restaurants. That my understanding is that the Spanish law, this is not about restaurants. In Spain, they have legal maximum temperatures legislated for sedentary work indoors. So if you were, I assume, if you were sitting at the receiving desk in a restaurant, or if you were sitting doing a secretarial job or anything else where you're sedentary, like I am right now, the legal maximum temperature is 27 degrees in Spain. And then for light physical work, it's 25 degrees. But as far as outdoor temperatures are concerned, then they go by the Spanish equivalent of the Met Office when it issues red or orange extreme heat warnings. Then working outdoors is legally banned. So none of that would cover work in the kitchen in the restaurants. But with these laws in place in Spain, do you notice a difference between, working practices in Spain versus working practices in the UK?
Well, I think the 27-degree thing is completely ignored. Otherwise, you'd never have a restaurant. There wouldn't be any restaurants.
Well, not only a restaurant, you wouldn't have all sorts of other business. But what's the availability of aircon, though, in Tenerife? It must be significant.
Well, but if you're cooking hot food,
sure,
to serve to customers that want the hot food, if severe air conditioning is cooling it down before it even leaves the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be catastrophic. Absolutely. It'd be disastrous for the business. Yeah. Colin, thanks very much. Thanks very much for calling in. Good to talk to you. Enjoy the rest of your summer in Spain when it arrives. Let's go to Woodford. John is on the line from Woodford. Good evening, John.
Oh, Simon. Firstly, very quickly, I want to say I'm absolutely honoured to be speaking to the best presenter that we have, that precisely and concisely explains the things that are happening in the world, and to certain leaders that we're not really sure of, you seem to bring absolute clarity.
Well, John, I really appreciate that. It's lovely to talk to you, and thank you for calling. Which you've given me an opportunity. Let me just do a quick plug. I will be doing my American Week at 10 to 6 tomorrow. Ben Kentish is in for Tom Swarbrick, and I will be there with American Week at 10 to 6 tomorrow night. But John, that's very kind of you. What would you like to say about heat and maximum temperatures?
Right, let me tell you that I'm 80, and in those 40 years of that being 80, I was a mobile mechanic. I went round repairing people's cars. If it rained, I went out and did the jobs. If it was cold, I went out and did the jobs. If it was hot, I went out and did the jobs. You don't stop. I mean, men are supposed to be men. They go out and do the job. If it gets too hot, then try to cool off and then go back to work. You've got to handle this in the way you feel is the way. We don't need governments to tell us what to do, because this is nappy-pamby, isn't it? We don't really want that, do we? Or do we want that?
Well, I don't know. It's interesting because, I mean, you'll forgive me, John, for saying that you are of an age that would remember when the country had a very active coal mining industry. And I don't know if you've ever been down a mine. I have been down mines in various parts of the world, and the temperatures down there get absolutely unbearable, never mind the other work and safety issues that exist. And, you know, perhaps in those kind of hazardous conditions, you would want to engage in some sort of maximum temperature point at which workers would not be required to carry on and would be able to down tools. But I do think that for most professions, this would be really difficult.
No, I agree with that. But the fact is they still worked. And did many of them die because of it? I'm not sure if they did. I think they just went on and did the job. They didn't moan about it. They went home, washed, showered, had their tea and went down the pub. And look, what are we making such a fuss at? I'll tell you why we're making this fuss, Simon, because this bill, you will understand. The reason this is happening at the moment is because Donald Trump has not been really on the radar in the last week, and we haven't heard anything else. So let's turn to what's the best news at the moment is the hot weather. Do you not agree?
Well, I mean, the Green Party and Sir Sadiq Khan put this on the radar. I mean, this is a realistic proposal that we are considering at a time when the country's temperatures are soaring. But by the way, Donald Trump's been up to all sorts of stuff this week. And I'll tell you what, John, if you listen at 10 to 6 tomorrow night, I'll tell you all about it.
Thank you very much. But it doesn't make any difference. Let's just get on with it and stop fussing. And if we don't like it, go out, get a bit of cold air and cool down, get back to the job and do it, and stop making a fuss about this. For God's sake, you know, it makes us... I mean, look at these footballers are going in and playing football in very high temperatures, and they're doing it for us and trying to win a certain medal, a certain...
Yeah, but they're getting the hydration breaks now.
Oh, God. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Hydration break. Well, I got to admit, that's what I'm talking about. I don't think Bobby Moore had hydration breaks, and he won the World Cup. And I was there for that, so I do remember that.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Simon.
John, pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much. Have a great night. Let's go to Eltham. Arnold is in Eltham this evening. Good evening, Arnold.
Good evening. Well, it would mean that the last of our steel workers will no longer have a job, and anyone working smelting or forging metal, because the temperatures they work in are horrendously high. And I came across this many years back on a holiday camp where it was November, we're having a huge fire. And we were about 6, 7, 8 metres away from the fire because it was so hot. But there were a couple of people there who worked in the steel works. They were right up next to the fire. They were completely acclimatised to it. Mm-hmm. And then you think, I'm a chartered surveyor. I survey lofts. And if I was out surveying today, I would have been in a loft. And you come out of there absolutely drenching in sweat after surveying it. You know, does that mean I stopped surveying and doing my job?
Well, I mean, it's quite interesting you say that, because in that video that Hannah Spencer of the Green Party issued today, she specifically talks about plumbers going into lofts and the kind of temperatures that they were experiencing. And that's one of the examples of the folks that she says should not be required to work after the temperature reaches what she doesn't propose a specific temperature level, but whatever that maximum temperature level is going to be. But you're absolutely right. All sorts of people work in lofts.
Yeah, they do. And the thing is, you have to know your own health. You have to know your own feelings. You have to be able to acclimatise yourself to this sort of work. You need to drink plenty of water. As soon as I come out of a loft after a really hot, sweaty time up there, I'm drinking quite a lot of water. And you just rehydrate and then carry on, do the rest of your work. There's no way that I could stop doing my job.
Arnold, thanks very much for calling in. Lee has texted in to say, hello, Simon, I'm a Bristol bus driver. I've just finished a 12-hour shift in a baking hot bus with no aircon. Managers don't even ask if drivers are okay, which is a real issue, right? I mean, managers should be asking if everybody's okay. Let's finish by talking briefly to David in Amsterdam. David, the clock is against me, but I'm very happy to hear what you have to say. Good evening.
Good evening, Simon. Many thanks for picking up the call and appreciate all your reports from America with James O'Brien.
Thank you very much.
Anyway, just a quick thing. Yeah, different aspect. My mum got taken into a hospital in the UK and she suffers from severe dementia and there's no air conditioning. But one of my older brothers went in yesterday and, he bought a fan. The NHS was not very happy with it. He insisted, and then he went out to buy 5 more for all the other people.
Well, that was a lovely thing to do.
Yeah, but I'm just amazed how the NHS cannot invest in air conditioning in such heat waves that we have at the moment.
Well, they need
my mother is very vulnerable. It makes me really angry.
I hear that, David, and I hope your mother's well, and I wish you all the best. And this comes down, of course, to money. All of this is going to come down to public expenditure and how are we going to slice that limited pie that we've got available so thinly, and what is the most sensible way of putting air conditioning into hospitals or schools? How do we go about doing that? Listen, we're going to come back to this conversation on subsequent programmes here on LBC. That is going to do it for me this evening. Thanks so much for your calls and messages throughout the past couple of weeks. Ian Dale back on your radio Monday evening from 7. I'm not going back to the States yet. I will be popping up at various points across the LBC schedule for much of the rest of the summer. If you missed any of tonight's show, you know where to find it, Global Player or the LBC app. Coming up at 1 on LBC, it's Clive Bull. But right now, it's Henry Riley.
Thank you very much, Simon. Good evening at Clock.
He has, as Prince of Wales, released how much tax he was paying, and this will be the first time he's done so as king and the first time a British monarch has done so.
Breaking news, the King makes history as the first monarch to release his tax return. It's come through in the last few